On one ordinary, no different day, harmony reigned in the heavenly demon cult monastery. The patriarch of the heavenly demon cult, called the heavenly demon, performs one of his rituals. Suddenly, someone bursts into the room and, crawling on all fours toward the patriarch, shouts in an indignant voice, "Hyun Nim." It turned out to be the first elder of a monastic order called the Demon Fist. He tells the patriarch that all 9 sects, orthodox and unorthodox, are already subordinate to them. And with tears and despair in his eyes asks the patriarch why he does not act. The Demon Fist does not understand how he can be now, because the fact that the patriarch is a famous master is not enough. With indignation and anger, the patriarch turned to the Demon Fist and told him not to talk nonsense. The patriarch recalled that one day while practicing divine arts, his soul and body split and he cannot return to his body. Blurred in illusions he remembers how fun it was at first, you can fly to the moon if you want. But he is interrupted by the Demon Fist's cries, who claims that the patriarch doesn't care about the monastery. Fury gripped the patriarch, his eyes glazed over with anger, he ordered the roaring to stop immediately. The patriarch tried to strike the Demon Fist, but no matter how much of a master of divine arts he was, without a physical body, he was unable to strike. But suddenly some black cloud formed, which began to pull the patriarch in. He doesn't understand what this irresistible force is pulling him in. The patriarch decides to use the magical technique of rock gravity, which increases his body weight to 6 tons. But naturally it is unsuccessful, because without a physical body the spell does not work. A black cloud of irresistible force pulled the patriarch in and only ashes remained of him. Falling into the black hole of this cloud, the patriarch began to hear words of criticism from some people. They claimed that anyone could support better, that he was just a commoner and did not have any superpowers. Suddenly, very loudly and distinctly, it was heard that someone shouted out, "Hansu." In a cold sweat, the frightened Hansu opened his eyes and screamed very loudly. He tried to come to his senses, got out of bed and said that he was very tired of it all. 2 years ago, portals to other worlds opened simultaneously all over the earth. From these portals, monsters began to emerge by the hundreds, destroying anything and everything in their path. Mankind went on the counterattack with the best weapons of their time, however. Modern weaponry was useless against the monsters. Humanity was in danger of total annihilation. And then people began to awaken superpowers, thanks to which they were able to hold the defense. Among them, the S-class hunters who had awakened the highest power abilities stood out. Their weapons were very effective against monsters. When the war ended in victory, the Class S hunters gained limitless power over all living things. But what has become of the 1% of people without superpowers, the so-called everyday people? Hyun-soo is from that same 1% of people, he's a supporter. Suddenly, after a nightmare, Hyun-soo receives a text message on his phone saying that the hospital has an acute shortage of beds and needs to pay the debt or they will have to discharge Hyundai. He realizes that discharging Hyundai means condemning him to a painful death and makes the decision to commit suicide. It's better to die than to see the last loved one die in agony like the others, thought Hyun-soo. He realizes that if Hyundai doesn't have a guardian, the state will be able to take better care of him. Despair overcame Hyun-soo, as suddenly, a black cloud appears in front of him, spinning like a vortex at an incredible speed. The cloud was getting closer and closer. Hyun-soo doesn't realize what it is. He started calling for help. And then the patriarch, called the heavenly demon, comes out of the cloud and drops right on top of Hyun-soo. In utter bewilderment and with fear in his eyes, Hyun-soo asks who this is and what he's doing here. The patriarch is shocked and asks Hyun-soo if he can see him. Hyun-soo leaned back frightened and started yelling for him to get out because he had nothing to steal and nothing of value. The patriarch started floating in the air and asked where he was. What Hyun-soo saw almost made him speechless. He asked the patriarch if he was not a hunter, to which the patriarch asked in surprise, who are hunters, is it food? And then the patriarch saw a TV set. He thought it was a wonderful painted lantern. I decided to poke at him with my fingers, but fell through him with my whole hand. It turns out the patriarch is still incorporeal. From what he saw, Hyun-soo assumed that the patriarch was a death ghost who had come for him, and began to shout that he had changed his mind, asking to be spared, because he had to take care of his brother. The patriarch was angered by such remarks. First he imagines him a thief, now a ghost of death, and showed him the middle finger out of anger. The patriarch realizes that he can touch Hyun-soo safely. Hansu still feels like he's going to hit him. The Patriarch began to wonder how such a thing was even possible and ducked through the door to think it over carefully. He found himself on a crowded city street and began to float quietly, immersed in his musings. However, the Patriarch's concentration was interrupted by interesting things. And the people here ride on horseless carriages, fast carriages, he thought. And houses so unusual he had never seen in his life. Is all this really real? To make sure that what was happening was real, the Patriarch tried to stop a guy walking by. However, he simply passed through him. The Patriarch realized he was only material to Hansu and decided it was time for him to go home. Meanwhile, Hansu is trying anything to seal this black hole that's still spinning in his room. And then he realizes that it is most likely a portal and it would be right to report it to the authorities. However, Hansu receives a call on his phone. It's Hunter Kim. He asks for Hyunsu's help because there is an emergency at the portal. An utterly elated and completely happy Hyunsu is ready to step out into the B-class portal to help. He can't believe it, he can't believe he got a call from Hunter Kim himself asking for help. Now he clearly realized that death was not an option. Suddenly, there is a voice behind Hyunsu. It was the Patriarch. He said that in his land is not accepted to talk to himself. Such people are considered for fools. An enraged Hyunsu doesn't realize that again this old man forgot a ghost in his room. The Patriarch began to explain that he tried to leave, but some unknown force stopped him, and the Patriarch did not really want to return to this miserable hut. Hyunsu decided to deal with all this later, because now the most important thing is to get to the portal and help people. He asked the Patriarch to find another place to live. The Patriarch asked what kind of portals and hunters he was always talking about. Hyunsu was shocked at what he heard. How could he not know what a portal was? However, Hyunsu didn't have time to explain all this. He warned the Patriarch that if he didn't get out of his apartment, he would call the police. The Patriarch decided to help Hyunsu, as he couldn't be late for something so important, so he used the heavenly demon wing spell. And then Hyunsu started soaring above the ground like a bird. The passers-by were completely puzzled as to who it was and where it was going. But his emotions were not positive at all. He asked the Patriarch to stop because people were watching. Flying over the right place, Hyunsu asked to be lowered to the ground immediately. The Patriarch did so. The landing wasn't soft at all. Hyunsu felt nauseous from such flights. When he came to his senses, Hyunsu got on the bus with the others. He began to have thoughts. Class B portals are dangerous and he could die in there, but on the other hand, if he survives, there's enough money to pay his hospital debts. Again, the Patriarch appears from somewhere. This time he jumped out of the roof of the bus. The frightened Hyunsu shouted loudly. He doesn't understand why this ghost is haunting him, but the Patriarch explains that every time he tries to leave, some force stops him. Hyunsu is just going crazy. His thoughts are filled with only what this old man wants and how long he will pursue him. Finally the bus arrived at the mountain at the top of which the portal had opened. The hunters were almost there. The sapports were each given a piece of equipment and moved out. The equipment proved to be quite heavy, so getting it to the portal was a bit of a challenge. Upon reaching the portal, Hunter Kim introduced himself and said that he was in charge of the operation. 1 Class B hunter, 4 Class C hunters, and 5 sapports are heading to the portal for reconnaissance. One of the B-class hunters named Iron decided to give a briefing, and reminded the battle-hardened ones that it was best to keep an eye on the newcomers. It was time to check out the gear. After instructing Iron, many of the sapports were discussing how gorgeous she was. Hyunsu had also volunteered to be a support just to see her. At this time, someone from the back approaches Hyunsu and says that it's been a while since they've seen each other. It's B-class hunter Jun-sung, and he can't believe his eyes that Hyunsu is still a sapporter. He doesn't understand what he's doing here, especially after what he did in the last operation. Hyunsu isn't happy with him, because he knows how horny Jun-sung is, beating people up left and right. He purposely provokes people by pretending he's just joking around. He once incapacitated Hyunsu for a whole month just for nothing. Jung-sun swung at Hyunsu and said it would be okay to say hello. Not hiding his hatred, Jun-sun spooked Hyunsu and asked who called him. Hyun said Hunter Kim called him. Jun-sun punched him and asked him to try not to try today like last time. At this time, the Patriarch approached Hyunsu and expressed his displeasure about Jun-sung's behavior. Hyunsu replied that he is always making trouble and blaming it on others. But then the Patriarch also hits Hyunsu. he doesn't understand why the Patriarch cracked him, and everyone around him thought Hansu had gone crazy and was fighting with himself. Suddenly an announcement was made that an operation was about to begin. Everyone was asked to gather at the portal and prepare for the infiltration. The Patriarch is also present among the hunters and supports, his interest in the operation and an unknown force keeping him at home. Even experienced hunters feel discomfort when entering a portal. The Patriarch wondered if he could experience such feelings. Finally crossed the portal. But what is this dried-up earth? Hansu asked the Patriarch. Hunter Kim began issuing commands to his subordinates to prepare for the operation and realize what kind of world they were dealing with. At this time, the Patriarch tells Hansu to go ahead and scout the area. However, Hansu says they can't do anything without orders. The Patriarch mocked him and said that he was just a servant porter who couldn't even take a step back. Hansu had nothing to say. However, the Patriarch shared with him his observations about this land. On the surface there is a desert, but there is some movement of underground water. Then Hansu hears that the hunters were able to find out that the essence of this world is water. So the Patriarch was right. At this time, Jun Sung walks over to the measuring device and talks about how this is all complete nonsense. Suddenly, water began to appear at his feet, the stream broke through more and more strongly and soon reached Jun Sung's height. Soon there were more and more of these jets, and the earth's crust was breaking up into small islands. And there they were, the attackers. They were mermaids. Amidst all the commotion, orders were heard to keep the newcomers close to the hunters. The mermaids spared no one in their path, burning eyes and huge fangs literally causing only fear. Hansu didn't understand how this was possible, because usually there was a safe zone at the entrance of the portal. But now, even B-class hunters can barely manage it. Then the order came that Hansu should immediately give the spear to Hunter Kim. Suddenly, Hansu is attacked by one of these monsters. The fear overcame him so much that he couldn't move. The mermaid's harpoon pierced through the armor like a simple rag, but Hansu shouldn't relax because the mermaid was preparing his next strike. This time, it was obvious that Hansu just didn't stand a chance. That monster with the fiery eyes would tear him apart. But suddenly, something saves Hansu. Some inexplicable force prevents the mermaid from killing him. Of course it's the Patriarch, he had to use the Heavenly Demon King strike. And as it turns out, he can fight monsters. However, even in such a situation the irony did not leave the Patriarch. It's too late to fight with some fish people, he says to himself. The enraged Russell would not just leave it at that, his main goal was to destroy the Patriarch at all costs. But no matter how hard he tried, all of his punches flew past the Patriarch. 1,000 years too young, the Patriarch turned to Russell, to inflict at least a scratch, he must try very hard. The Patriarch destroyed one by one, each of them wanting to avenge their brothers, but their strength was nothing compared to his power. The mermaids are just a parody of the human image, and it's disgusting, shouted the Patriarch. He used a flash of chaos that annihilated all opponents 45 meters away. And then Jun Sung sees that all this carnage is happening in Hansu's field, but he doesn't understand how it's possible because he's just a commoner, a regular saboteur. Suddenly a mermaid crawls out from under the crust of the earth. He is several times larger than the others, his eyes and fangs causing even more fear. It must be a fish prince, the Patriarch surmised, and decided to bestow the honor of dying at the hand of a true master. The Patriarch gathers all his strength and incredible power to strike. But what happens? All the Patriarch's energy has gone, he's fallen through the monsters as if he didn't exist. He's powerless. Leaking through the Patriarch, the monster reached Hansu. Death had never been so close to him before. Hansu makes the surest and bravest decision at that moment. He puts up a block and barely defends himself from the mermaid strike. But Hansu has no more strength left, not enough for another block of punches. At that moment, the Patriarch appears and reminds Hansu that if he doesn't get up now, he'll die. Russell wastes no time, he only has one goal in front of him, to destroy Hansu. The Patriarch shouts with all his might for Hansu to get up immediately. The Patriarch tells him to look closely at this monster. Russell only looks strong, in fact he has thin bones. The Patriarch points out Russell's weak spot, he draws Hansu's attention to the monster's collarbone. It's sticking out and it won't be hard to break. With a kick in the ass, the Patriarch pushes Hansu forward so that he can fight honorably and overpower the mermaid. However, Hansu's courage is lacking for this battle and fear overcomes him. But then the words and instructions of the Patriarch appear in his mind. He remembers Ruzel's weaknesses and gathers all his strength into a fist. Hansu realizes he no longer has a choice and strikes right at Ruzel's collarbone. He succeeds in overpowering the monster. Hansu can't believe he was able to knock out Ruzel with his own hands. But the fight isn't over. The Patriarch tells Hansu not to stand there, but to take his spear and finish the monster. Hansu has only killed small slug monsters before and doesn't understand how he can finish off Ruzel with that spear. While Hansu was gathering his thoughts, the Patriarch reminded him that if he didn't kill the monster would kill everyone around him. It was necessary to act immediately because the hunters and sapports were already barely fighting off the remaining mermaids. And then Hansu had a flashback to all the events of his past. His parents died in a car accident because of such monsters, and his brother is now in the hospital. After gathering all the pain, anger, and resentment, Hansu finally strikes. His heart is filled with hatred, and he destroys the monster. Suddenly a miracle happens. Hansu has overcome his fear. He becomes awakened, now he has powers. Hansu can't believe his eyes. It's really the awakening. He's been waiting for this moment for so long. His stats appear in front of him, but what does he see? He is endowed with a unique ability to follow clues. Such a superpower makes him furious and nothing more. He doesn't understand how he managed to awaken such a worthless superpower. Meanwhile, the hunters and sapports are recovering from the battle. No one realizes how such monsters could appear in a B-class portal. Suddenly a hunter comes running up and yells for everyone to leave immediately. The scouting failed and it turned out that this was not a B-class portal at all, but a top-class portal. Iron decides to take matters into her own hands. She tells everyone to retreat immediately, and for anyone who is still on their feet to help the wounded. There are so many wounded after such a battle, no one expected that a real hell would be waiting for them and such strong monsters in this portal. Hansu can't come to his senses. It's the first time he's been in such a dangerous situation. Suddenly, Junsung approaches him and tells him that they will need to talk urgently when they get back from the portal. Hyunsu's first thought was that he wanted to punish him again and vent his hatred. Everyone headed for the portal, some of them carrying several wounded people on their backs. Hyunsu couldn't figure out what he had done to deserve a reprimand. After crossing the portal, a moment of silence was held in honor of all those who lost their lives in this difficult battle. While the others couldn't hold back their tears and regret for what had happened, Jun-sung only cared that the association would surely pin the incident on them as their seniors. And at that moment, the news is announced that despite all the pain and loss, there is one awakened one among them. Hyunsu doesn't understand how they even found out about it, and now it's clear what Jun-sun wanted to talk to him about. After all the fuss, it was told to pack up all the gear as it is the property of the association. While Hyunsu is busy packing his gear, Jun-sun comes up to him and tells him not to get too excited. Jun-sun gives him a supposedly friendly slap and asks him to brag to everyone about what superpower he has manifested. It's noticed by the people around him, and everyone realizes that Jungseon is once again poking around the sapporter. But some people are also curious about Hyunsu's superpower. Hyunsu doesn't really want to share the news about his superpower, but he still says the first word of the superpower's name. He says following. Jungseon immediately picks up on this and continues. Following the clues. He can't contain his laughter and starts mocking Hyunsu. Everyone around also heard about Hyunsu's superpower and didn't hesitate to start laughing loudly and despising the guy. Hyunsu felt like a real laughingstock. Suddenly, the Patriarch appeared and asked him if he was embarrassed by his superpower of following cues. Jun-sung noticed that the boy was talking to himself and asked ironically, did he wake up and go crazy? And then Jun-sung decides to put Hyunsu's superpower to the test. He takes a swing at the guy, and immediately his superpower of following clues is activated. The Patriarch appears behind Hyunsu's back and tells him to take a step back. Hyunsu complies. Jun-sung tries to throw punches but misses every time. Out of anger and rage he starts swinging many times harder. A notification comes in that the application of the hint following ability was successful and Hyunsu's attack power increases by 15%. This kind of news made Jun-sun even more mad. He gathers all his strength against Hyunsu. Hyunsu follows the Patriarch's instructions as if they were one whole organism. Their thoughts are merged together. The Patriarch commands the technique of a tiger crouch left and a lightning fast right punch. The new technique for Hansu seems to be written directly into his memory. Everything around him freezes and it seems like there's no one around but his target. Hansu confidently uses his new technique against Junsung and strikes him down. The people around them are shocked by what they see. Hansu manages to take Junsung down with one punch. Jungseon doesn't understand how this is possible, since the guy only woke up a couple hours ago. While medics are called for the injured man, Hansu can't figure out how he knocked him out with one punch. At this time, one of the hunters approaches him and tells him that the use of force against a colleague is strictly forbidden. But the hunter is amazed by his skills and turned a blind eye for the first time. He promised to put in a good word in the association for Hansu. Everyone is thrilled that this guy was able to knock out Jungseon. And then that same Jaren comes up to him and says she hopes to work together in the future. Hansu's heart was pounding at an unbelievable speed. Suddenly, the Patriarch comes up to him and asks him if he likes this maiden. Hansu started to deny it, but he had one request for the old man that he couldn't utter. The Patriarch said to hurry up because he wouldn't claw everything out of him. Suddenly, Hansu fell to his knees and asked to be his disciple. The Patriarch's response shocked Hansu. He is angry and upset at the same time. The Patriarch replied to him that he just didn't want to. In his defense, the Patriarch only said that he doesn't take anyone as a disciple. If he took someone to babysit, he would have no time to practice martial arts. To which Hansu asked, what's the point of practicing martial arts if the Patriarch is incorporeal anyway? Hansu also reminded the Patriarch that he himself had said how bored he was. The Patriarch was getting more and more pissed off by those words. And the last straw that got the Patriarch was Hansu saying that if he died, the Patriarch wouldn't be able to go back to where he came from. However, the Patriarch managed to hold back his anger because there was some grain of truth in Hansu's words. Then the Patriarch asked the boy if he would have freedom of movement if he became a hunter. Hansu asked the Patriarch what he meant. Did he mean traveling in all worlds? That's exactly what the Patriarch meant. Then Hansu explained to him that if he reached the A grade, he could go anywhere he wanted, and if he reached the S grade, Hansu would be untouchable. Untouchable means that no one can challenge you, the Patriarch asked. In that case the Patriarch himself is untouchable. Suddenly, the Patriarch told Hansu to go through the ritual of 9 bows. The boy was stunned because he had no idea what the ritual was. Then the master shrieked at him and said that he would be his teacher, so immediately one must bow 9 times. However, Hansu was stopped more by the number of people around him, because they would think that he had lost his mind. It's now or never, shouted the Patriarch. Hansu immediately began to obey the order and bowed 9 times. The people around him were completely puzzled as to what was going on. Huntress Iron also noticed what was going on and asked her colleague if this kid's head was all right. After this busy day, Hansu finally returns home. But as soon as he enters his room, the Patriarch tells him to clean his room immediately because his student can't live in a pigsty. Of course Hansu didn't disobey his teacher and started cleaning the room. But it wasn't easy to please the Patriarch. And then the Patriarch notices that there is paper pasted on the wall and asks Hansu why he did that. Then the guy explained that he was the one who had taped up the portal from which the Patriarch had come. Without thinking for a long time, the master decided to cross the portal. And of course, he took Hansu with him. As soon as they crossed the portal Hansu felt only emptiness. There was nothing around but emptiness. Then the Patriarch told him that it was a great place to go through the trials of life and death. Such statements made Hansu feel scared. The master ordered the boy to take off his shirt and sit down, but he resisted. The Patriarch shouted at him not to contradict his master. When Hansu followed the Patriarch's instructions, he explained to him that he was adjusting the flow of his meridians and energy nodes. Pure energy is required before learning martial arts. The sensation was not pleasant, but the Patriarch warned Hansu that if it was too much for him, then learning the art would be all the more impossible for him to endure. The Patriarch crumpled the boy's body like plasticine in his hands. However, in his thoughts he recognized that he had not met such a healthy body for a long time. The master finally finished and asked Hansu how he felt. Hansu told him that he was almost dead, and he would have died a little sooner. The master came to the conclusion that Hansu's body was perfect for martial arts, but these are times like this that martial arts have been consigned to oblivion. So they returned to the portal. As soon as they got home, Hansu immediately said that he felt incredibly light, his fatigue was gone. It's because the Patriarch cleaned his clogged chakras. Now Hansu feels nothing but lightness. Hansu couldn't get enough of that airiness, says he could take off. And then he crashes into the ceiling. Suddenly, the Patriarch says that he forgot to say that he shared his heavenly demon skill energy with him. But how is it that Hansu doesn't understand? The Patriarch says he's shocked that it all worked out and how Hansu survived. It's unbelievable. The guy is in a stupor from what he heard. Then Hansu started yelling at the Patriarch that he was crazy and almost killed him. This angered the teacher and he decided to teach him a lesson not to raise his voice and to know his place. The Patriarch threw him several times. Master explained to him that if Hansu couldn't withstand even a particle of his divine energy, he wouldn't even be able to begin training. What Hansu had learned from the Patriarch yesterday was the only technique available to mortals. It was morning, and Hansu and his teacher went to the association because the hunter had promised to put in a good word about him. Timidly and with a little excitement, Hansu approached the girl at the front desk to tell her that the hunter had signed him up for an evaluation. And what was his surprise when the girl said they were already looking forward to seeing him and asked to take selfies with him. The girl told him to go down to the 5th underground floor and find the appraisal department there. He should also go to the chief appraiser, Naksu. Hansu was shaking with excitement and didn't know what was in store for him. The Patriarch told him not to be a coward and reminded him that he had to gain knowledge to be his disciple. As soon as Hansu went down to the right floor he was surprised by a strange sound. It sounded like someone was screaming, "A great shot." Some guy is admiring a girl's hitting that knocked out 687 units. She claims she can do more. Chief Evaluator Naksu is watching all of this. He says that this girl is a B-class hunter and she is not ready to take a hit over 900 units yet. This was very frustrating for the girl. She was definitely confident in her abilities and was able to knock out a hit for more units. Suddenly the appraiser notices Hansu. He is very happy to see him arrive and asks to go inside. However, Hansu's arrival was not only welcomed by the receptionist and the appraiser, but also by everyone who saw Hansu on their way. Everyone wanted to talk to him and say hello. The appraiser told him that rumors had spread about how Hansu had put Junsun in his place. At that time, the guy immediately understood the behavior of the people around him. Suddenly, a girl came up and asked if the testing would continue. Then the head evaluator sent his assistant Kim to test the girl and Hansu himself. While Hansu was on his way to pick up the appraiser, he crossed paths with this cute girl on the way. The Patriarch asked Hansu what his unhealthy fear of women was. The Patriarch asked Hansu what his unhealthy fear of women was. As the girl headed for the testing, she asked the assistant if Hansu was definitely the awakened one. The assistant confidently said yes. Then the girl got excited and said that it was probably her future co-worker and they would meet again in battle. At this time, Hansu changed into overalls, which the Patriarch didn't like at all. He said it was better to wear what he wore instead of this. Finally, Hansu began the test. The Patriarch advised him to draw energy from the technique he had learned yesterday thanks to his teacher. At that time, Hansu gathered all of his power to unleash an incredible strike for a large number of units. He felt all the power he had felt during the battle with the Mermaid. And then the scoreboard shows 1120 units. The emotions on the assessor's face cannot be conveyed in words. He literally screamed. Hansu can't believe his eyes, he can't believe he got such a score. That girl only scored 700 units. He used the lightning strike he used yesterday. But the power is incomparable, that's what gives you control over energy. The appraiser screams, unbelievable. Hansu is a Class A warrior, their strikes reach 900-1500 units. Only Class S is higher. Then Hansu asked for another punch and this time he broke the shield. The appraiser thought that if Hansu had hit Junsun with the same force, the latter would be dead by now. Hansu demanded another hit, but the evaluator said they didn't have any more spare shields, so not today. Hansu then suggested moving on to the next test. Next up was the testing of leg kicks. This time, Hansu kicks out 1,377 units. Too bad, says the appraiser, still a little short of the S-class. Hansu couldn't help but feel proud of himself, but the Patriarch was not satisfied with his result. He said that if Hansu had concentrated his energy faster, he would have knocked out 1,500 units long ago. Hansu headed to the next running speed test and the evaluator said with confidence that Hansu had a stable A grade. Just like that, the evaluator told him that he would be able to take the most important combat stimulation test in the afternoon. In the meantime, Hansu headed to the dining room. There he saw ramyun. Its price in the market had skyrocketed after the factories were destroyed and he couldn't even look in its direction. With an incredible appetite, Hansu ate ramyun. He said it was the best food in the world. Even the Patriarch was interested in this dish. Too bad he is incorporeal and can't taste this incredible flavor. After lunch, Hansu headed for that all-important test. He didn't know what to expect yet. Suddenly the same girl comes out in front of him. She was covered in wounds and bleeding. Hansu is shocked. The girl was followed by Kim's assistant and asked if she was okay and how she was feeling. The assistant said she did a great job and asked her to go to the office and get her class document. And then Hansu thought that it looked like he was going to have a hard time there. It was unclear what to expect. The appraiser greeted Hansu. He introduced him to the battle stimulation cabinet. This system was created by the brilliant engineer and S-class Hunter Anderson Walker. The combat stimulation gives the most realistic feel of fighting a monster, commented the evaluator. He also warned that damage taken during stimulation has realistic consequences too. The evaluator started the briefing and said that there are 10 levels in total to go through. Hansu's grade is A, so he starts at level 4. The battle stimulation began. Thanks to the system, Hansu finds himself in a very green area, but he can't yet surmise the danger ahead. Whoever created this machine is clearly versed in the magic of the mystical dimensions, says the Patriarch. What is mystical dimension magic? Hansu asked. It is used to deceive the enemy, or to hide something, replied the Patriarch. Suddenly, a monster attacks from the Patriarch's side. He ran out of strength last time, but this time he's sure to have a blast with these monsters. There were more and more monsters. They appeared as if out of nowhere from different directions. The situation was escalating, and then the Patriarch orders him to use the lazy donkey technique. Hansu, of course, didn't immediately understand, but he followed his teacher's order. It turned out that the monsters weren't the most dangerous thing that awaited Hansu. A huge ogre, 10 times bigger than him, appeared in front of him. The ogre swung its fists like sledgehammers and destroyed everything in its path. Then Hansu started yelling that he was too huge and asked his teacher what to do. The Patriarch replied to him that now he had a great opportunity to see what he could do. He would have to come up with something on his own. Hansu realizes that if he runs away, he won't be given a class, so he decides to perform a killing kick of 1,377. Hansu was about to be happy that he had succeeded, but the ogre instantly came to his senses. Ogre grabs the guy. Hansu realized that if he lost consciousness, it was all over. He started calling for help from his teacher. The teacher didn't respond. Then Hyun mouthed to himself to calm his breathing and distribute his energy throughout his body. He began to feel the energy of the heavenly demon within him. It flowed rapidly through his veins. All that power surged out of Hyunsu's body. He was able to concentrate his energy and overpower the ogre. A notification has sounded that the level has been passed. Level 5 will be ready in a few minutes. Appraiser says never video of someone breaking through the physical suppression system. He's clearly strong. Suddenly, Class A Hunter Lee Mina enters the appraiser's room. She says that the guy has a lot of potential and there is still a lot to see. The appraiser is excited about her arrival, saying word of talent quickly reaches the association. The girl says she can't let such a rare Class A fighter be taken from under their noses. The testing continued. This time, Hyunsu was in for an unbelievable cold snap. The Patriarch was surprised that this magician could also create an illusion of weather. He says that even among sorcerers skilled in the techniques of mystic dimensions few are capable of such a thing. Suddenly, a girl runs towards Hyunsu and asks for help. Hyunsu asks her what's wrong. Suddenly, this sweet and defenseless girl turns into a monster and clings to Hyunsu's throat. At this time, the girl from the association shares with the evaluator that the guy has a very rare talent, different from any awakened she's seen. It turns out that in this level, Hansu has to fight vampires. He's good at the techniques. Again the announcement that the level will pass. The appraiser admires this guy. Level 6 is about to begin, but before that, Hansu can rest for 30 minutes. Hansu is not very happy with himself, as he feels he could have done better. But the evaluator assures him that he has nothing to worry about because he is the first A-class fighter to pass level 5. The appraiser asked Hansu to go to the office and get his papers. The guy thanked him and headed out. However, a gorgeous girl appears on his path. Hansu was stunned again and didn't know what to do. The girl introduced herself, saying her name was Lee Mina and she was from the association. Hansu was still motionless. Barely, he reached out to her. And then the Patriarch appeared and told him that he was his disciple and so the girls would be lining up to meet him. Lee Mina held out a contract for Hansu to sign from the association. She said that any hunter would be attracted to conditions like theirs. Hansu can't believe it, he's finally going to be a real hunter. Lee Mina went on to clarify that this contract is tailor-made for Hansu. The Patriarch tells the guy that such a beauty offers to sign such an important document. Even in the Patriarch's monastery you don't meet such beauties. But then the Patriarch talks about thinking with his head and that Hansu deserves better. When he saw 10 years of service in the terms of the contract, he told him to reduce the term immediately. Then Hansu told the girl that he would prefer a 5-year contract. And to increase the life risk premium since he would have to raid S-class portals. Lee Mina was shocked at these conditions, but she knew that they shouldn't let it go because it was a newcomer that the association really needed. Suddenly a girl bursts into the room unexpectedly, kicks the door with her foot and yells, "Gotcha." She says the association is at it again. And that they don't bet anything on hired hunters, and always write such Kabbalistic contracts. And then Hansu asked, "Red Lions?" "Exactly," replied the girl. She said her name was Hurak and she was from the Red Lions Guild. She is an S-class hunter. The Patriarch couldn't hold back his emotions and told Hansu that this girl is also one to look at. The girl squeezed Lee Minu on the sofa and informed Hansu that the Red Lion Guild was offering him much more than an association. Lee Mina lost her temper, she claims that it's the association's business. To which Hurak replies that she is also registered with the association. The Patriarch cannot contain his admiration, he says that this girl is incredibly strong and in their world he has never met such a girl. Hurak continues to press Hansu, she tells the guy that he'll have much more opportunities in the guild than in this corporation of hoodlums, this is from the fact that the corporation has a lot of expenses. Lee Mina replies that this information is long outdated. And then Hurak says that the Red Lion Guild has been given the same rights as the association and they are waiting for official confirmation. This information stunned everyone. Lee Mina immediately set out to verify it. Hansu can't believe that the Red Lion Guild is now as powerful as a government agency. Hansu has finally made up his mind and is ready to voice his verdict. He had to interrupt the arguments and the girls turned their attention to him. At this time, however, there was a real massacre going on in one of the portals in the mountains of Illich. One of the hunters realizes they're in trouble. None of this was in the intelligence. It was said that they would have to walk on wet ground, but there is a deep sea. There are many times more monsters than expected, and they are much faster than the hunters. This is definitely not a Class B portal. The hunters are ambushed, if they don't do something, they'll be wiped out. They decide to call the squad leader for help. The petty officer orders a retreat, he says he will hold them off, all hunters need to retreat to dry land. The hunters know that the petty officer has a unique superpower for emergencies, they are sure he will save everyone. Yeoman uses the shadow clone technique, it is one of the most difficult S-class techniques, lasting up to 10 minutes. Everything worked out, the hunters thanked their petty officer, because thanks to him they survived. The petty officer asked them for a beer on arrival for such a feat. The hunters waiting on land for their colleagues also admired the petty officer and were awed by his skills. "It's over, it's time to call off the operation," said the petty officer. Suddenly, a huge monster bursts out of the water and bites off half of the petty officer's body. Meanwhile, Hansu voiced his decision. He said that he would wait for other offers in case there was a guild with more favorable conditions for him. He wouldn't be in a hurry. He said goodbye and left his number for both girls, telling them to call him in case of anything. Hurak is amazed at such insolence. Both the association and the Red Lions offer him a contract and he just walks away. She doubts that the other guilds will even offer him a contract. Hurak literally burst into flames with anger and rage. Limina thought that she hadn't changed a bit, just as fiery as ever. Meanwhile, Hansu had returned home. And he and the Patriarch began their training. The Patriarch informed him that he would now learn the gate of superiority of a heavenly demon. The teacher explained that classes are earned for defeating a strong monster, or when you find a rare artifact. Hansu asked him if there were any classes higher than the 5 known ones. The Patriarch began his training. He explained to the student that stance and proper movement are the foundation of martial arts. He says that once Hansu learns the basics, he can start learning the techniques. The Patriarch is confident that with a talent like Hansu's, he can learn everything the first time. The teacher began to show the first set of 5 superiority gate movements. The movements are light and smooth. Hansu successfully mastered this complex. So much for the appearance of the heavenly demon, says the Patriarch. The rest should be applied according to the situation. However, Hansu didn't learn everything the first time. The Patriarch tells him that there is still a lot of trial and error ahead. The teacher proceeded to demonstrate the second set of moves, the flight of the heavenly demon. The teacher says that once Hansu manages to master this complex, he will ride the air like a dragon and be behind the enemy's back in no time. So much for the flight of a heavenly demon, says the Patriarch. In his thoughts, Hansu realizes that this speed of flight doesn't even compare to when his teacher drags him through the air. The Patriarch tells Hansu that if he internalizes the appearance of the heavenly demon and the flight of the heavenly demon, he will be able to learn the first 6 techniques of his cult, crushing blows from the heavens. The teacher tells Hansu not to get distracted and not to make faces, because the third set of moves is even more complicated. The Patriarch started the third set. The information isn't digested in Hansu's head at all. The Patriarch just disappeared before his eyes, he can't see him at all. Just then, the teacher appears behind his student's back and says that this is the heavenly demon's soul exit technique. The Patriarch immediately proceeds to the 4th complex, the heavenly demon's soul vortex. This turned out to be the Patriarch's favorite technique. Thanks to this technique, he can spin so fast that he creates an invisible vortex that consumes the opponent's soul. Hansu couldn't absorb even 1% of what he saw. He doesn't know how to repeat it all. The Patriarch reiterates that if he internalizes the soul vortex and soul exit, the following 5 techniques of crushing blows from the heavens will become available to him. Hansu asked the teacher, is there a total of 11 techniques? The Patriarch replied that there are 12, and for the 12th technique, the minimum requirement is to know the 5th complex of the heavenly demon's superiority gate. Hansu realized that if he mastered even the fully 5th complex superiority gate, it didn't guarantee that he could master the 12th technique. The Patriarch proceeded to demonstrate the 5th complex. He stomped his foot so that the whole world turned upside down and Hansu fell under the ground. Rise up so that all around you bow down, said the Patriarch. Hansu lay face down with no strength at all. Meanwhile, a meeting is taking place in the association to commemorate the massacre in the mountains of Illich. It is reported that only 4 B-class hunters and 5 sapports survived. One of the counselors says Petty Officer Daeho is dead. This is the association's 3rd raid into the portal of the mountains of Illich and again a defeat. One of those present turned to the head of the intelligence department and asked what they were doing there if they couldn't properly categorize this portal. The negotiations turned into real arguments, and there was an outcry in the room. They could not come to anything logical and common. Suddenly, Li Mina stands up from the table and says that they can all fight amongst themselves, but it won't solve the problem. So she proposes her own solution. At this time, Hansu wakes up in a cold sweat in his bed and doesn't realize how he got there. The Patriarch yells at him that he's a disgrace because he fainted out of practice. And then Hansu remembered that he was also trying to learn the heavenly demon's superiority gate, and then something happened. The Patriarch explained to him that the gate of superiority was a skill that allowed one to move through the air as if on the ground. If he showed it at full strength, Hansu would die. Hansu's thoughts were that he would never want to go through something like that again. Then the Patriarch reminded him that he had already told Hansu that he wasn't ready. He advised his disciple to focus on increasing his energy potential. Hansu obediently agreed with the teacher and lay down to rest and gain strength to continue his studies. Meanwhile, at a meeting at the association, Li Na is ready to propose a solution to the problem. She suggested that the association should consider cooperation with other associations. This proposal provoked a storm of negativity. At that time, Li Na continued and said that they needed the cooperation of the Red Lion Guild. Such a statement caused even more discontent from the surrounding people. The people present were talking about how they had already given the Red Lions the right to use the portals. And if that was Li Na's only solution, then it was time for her to quit. A frustrated Li Na is immersed in her thoughts. She realizes that for the association, portals are already just an object of commerce. The next day started off great for Hansu. His paycheck came in and he could finally pay for his brother's hospitalization. When he paid off the debt, there was virtually nothing left in his account. That's when he thought he should have signed the contract. But Hansu's phone was flooded with offers of cooperation from other guilds besides the association and the Red Lions. Then Hansu got excited and suggested that the teacher go eat ramen. The Patriarch was actually happy about the idea, even though he couldn't taste the food. And Hansu tried to jab the teacher in the face, saying he should try it. Then the teacher got angry and swung to slap him in the face. But the nimble Hansu dodges, saying he's learned a thing or two about the heavenly demon's appearance. Happy Hansu went to the store to buy noodles. Then he meets his friend Yoon. He asked her how she was doing. The girl replied that she works part-time at this store on weekends to help her little siblings. This touched Hansu and he went to the cash register, punched his own merchandise and left the money on the counter. The girl went to the cash register and noticed she needed to give her change. She caught up with the guy but he told her it was for her. The girl was struck to the heart. She could not contain her pleasant emotions. At this time the Patriarch sneaks up and asks the guy if he is planning to buy a girl's heart with money. Hansu then revealed that Yoon also lost her parents when the portals opened, and now she's raising her brother and sister alone. The guy also shared that the girl, just like himself, sacrificed school to earn money for her family. But the Patriarch slapped him on the back and said that it was not proper for his disciple to sing dithyrambs to himself. Finally they arrived home and Hansu began to savor the divine noodles. Is it really that good? The Patriarch asked. The guy said they make the best ramyeon in the world and that everyone should try it. Then the Patriarch couldn't take it anymore and reached for the sticks. He couldn't watch the kid enjoy this food anymore. And oh, my goodness! The Patriarch was able to eat the noodles. Hansu couldn't believe his eyes. The teacher's emotion was incredible. He said it was definitely one of the most delicious dishes in the universe. That means the Patriarch can only eat from Hansu's hands. What a good student, said the teacher. Then the Patriarch ordered Hansu to feed his teacher. The boy wasn't very happy. Now another inconvenience had been added. It was a beautiful sunny day in the city of Kongdong. People were going about their business. For example, there was a girl walking along, happy that she was able to buy lunch boxes for her children. But then the peace of the city was disturbed by monsters. They began to emerge from the ground along with jets of water. The city began to flood, the mermaids killing everything in their path. People had nowhere to run. Among the monsters was a female, clearly their commander-in-chief. She shouted that this was now their land of plenty and that they would drive out all who crowded it. She screamed that they would now be the rulers of this land. The monsters stopped at nothing. At this time, Hansu and his teacher were still studying in the black hole from where the Patriarch appeared. However, the Patriarch could not understand why this dimension was empty, because he always felt a burst of energy there. And why he had fallen into another time and dimension. Hansu tried the practice of energy circulation. Afterward, he feels rested and less tense. The teacher explained to him that circulation cleanses his streams of negative energy. Hansu jokingly said that after the circulation, he would not need to see a doctor. The Patriarch told him not to talk nonsense, but rather to take a stand and practice heavenly demon apparition and heavenly demon flight. Although Hansu's abilities were not good in the last training session, but he had learned the techniques. Now he'll try to reproduce what he memorized. Hansu's doing great. The Patriarch didn't think he would do so well the first time. This guy really is gifted. At this time, the association is in total chaos. The alarm sounds and an announcement of flooding in Kangdong is made. Urgent mobilization. Li Mi-na says she was sure this would happen, should have teamed up with the Red Lions. She immediately assumed that if it's in Kangdong, then the Daizek Guild is already there. The leader of the guild is a human panther named Hyunwoo. Li Mi-na immediately ordered to send all the fighters she could to the center of events. She clearly understood that the Daizek Guild would not be able to cope without help. At this time, Hansu and the Patriarch finished their training and returned home to gain strength. And then the Patriarch politely addressed Hansu. The guy didn't even understand why he was so kind. And the Patriarch gives out that after the training he wants to have a refreshment and it is necessary to prepare him a ramyeon. Also asked him to turn on that magic lantern from which the Vestnik says he wants to learn more about this world. Hyunsu turns on the TV and the news says that there is now flooding and chaos in Kangdong. The fish people are flooding the city and killing people. Hyunsu immediately realized that the monsters had broken out of the portal of the mountains of Illich. This meant that the third raid had also been defeated. The Patriarch asked the guy about the location of the Illich Mountains, since they had been there recently. Hyunsu confirmed that they had been there a couple of days ago, and then Hyunsu is covered in cold sweat. He remembered that this is the neighborhood of that girl Yoon who takes care of her brother and sister on her own. The guy takes a bullet out of his house and runs to help. There is still a chance to save his acquaintance and her family. He realizes it takes too long by car, but if he could run in a straight line, would be there in 20 minutes. But there are buildings in his way, and then Hyunsu makes the best decision at that moment. He'll use the flight of the sky demon. Hyunsu practices the incredible technique his teacher showed him. The Patriarch watches from the sidelines and is pleased with his student's performance. Meanwhile, the Daizek Guild in Kangdong, led by the Panther Man, are holding the defense. The only hope is in the commander-in-chief. He tells everyone not to panic and to fight with confidence. Even the local butcher, Bambo, has come to the rescue. He fights alongside the hunters with incredible bravery. Everything was going according to plan, until suddenly the butcher was attacked from behind by a mermaid. The butcher didn't stand a chance. But a beautiful huntress came to the rescue. The butcher marveled at how nimble her boat was. The huntress advised him to buy one. The huntress decided to introduce herself. She shouted to the butcher that she was a chemist archer from Kangdong. Butcher was grateful for her help, and showed her an encouraging gesture in greeting. At that moment, a monster of incredible size bursts out of the ground. It grabs the butcher and bites off half his body. The archer sees all this happen before her eyes, and with anger and hatred, she decides to avenge Bambo. She fires one arrow after another, but the monster doesn't even feel her blows. The Panther Man notices this. He immediately grabs the archer and tells her they need to get out. He doesn't want her to get eaten too. Then the female commander-in-chief of these monsters shows up. She says the hunters make good food. The more hunters that come here, the better, she says. They need more victims. At this time, the giant monster catches up with the Panther Man and the archer. A few seconds and there will be no trace of them. But suddenly Hyunsu appears. He uses one of the strongest heavenly demon techniques and heads straight for the monster. A huge flash of light appears above the heads of the Panther Man and the archer. They don't understand what's happening. The panther asks the archer who he is and how he killed the monster with one blow. There's just no such thing. The archer assumed it was someone from the S-class. At this time, the Patriarch prompts Hyunsu that the monster's life energy hasn't been extinguished yet. The monster makes a counterattack, but Hyunsu uses the heavenly demon apparition technique. After such a reception the guy's condition was not good, it was like his legs started to fall off. However, the monster still remains alive. The Patriarch shouts to his disciple that he is a moron and you need to distribute energy evenly to all the muscles of the body. Hyunsu heeded his teacher's advice and continued this difficult fight. The Patriarch continued to watch from the sidelines. Li Mi-na at this time is standing in traffic and nervous that there is no way she can get to the center of the action any faster. And then, on the dashboard of her car, a stream of the events in that very place comes on. The anchor asks the viewers who the hunter fighting the giant is. Everyone is talking about an unknown hunter bravely fighting a giant monster. The hunter no one knows about. Li Mi-na can't believe her eyes, she recognized Hyunsu. She had no idea he was so strong. The girl makes a decision to get out of the car and head faster there on her own. The main thing for her was to make it in time. Hansu is holding his defenses quite well at this time. He uses the heavenly demon flight technique, and he succeeds in doing so. In the moment, Hansu thought that if it was testing, there would be at least 1,300 units there. The Patriarch tells him that the snake's most vulnerable spot is the chin. He needs to get close to it with the flight of a celestial demon. But then this woman appears again. She turns to the serpent and says that this man is dangerous, he must be killed immediately. Hansu finally got close to the serpent's chin. He is fully prepared to deliver the decisive blow. The woman keeps yelling for the snake to devour and take Hansu's power. The snake needs to grow. Hansu staggered backwards, failing to land a punch to the serpent's chin. The serpent kicked out to the ground. The Patriarch realizes that this sorceress is supporting the monsters with healing magic, and that's another matter entirely. He had never felt such a wild urge to intervene before. If he were material he would have turned them all to dust. The only thing the Patriarch can do now is to save his disciple. But it's not clear how. Suddenly, that Hurak shows up. She orders everyone to stand still and don't move. The maiden turns to Hansu and asks if things are really that bad. The Patriarch is very happy about the maiden's arrival. She tells Hansu that he was good, defending the city bravely. But if he'd known there was a sorceress here, he might have won. She also turns to the guy and says that she said all this as a future guild member. Now she takes matters into her own hands. The sorceress at this time says that the girl is very strong. Such mortals she has not met for a long time. Hurak begins her battle with the snake. She will definitely be able to defeat this vile beast. The Patriarch picks up Hansu and says that running away is just a strategic retreat. At this time, outside the store, the mermaids attack Yun. She screams and begs for help. She's never been so scared before, but suddenly an archer and a human panther appear. The archer deftly arrowed these mermaids. They rescued the girl. The archer picked up Yun to take her to a shelter, and the panther went in search of other survivors. Finally, Hansu wakes up. He is very weak, can't feel a single piece of his body, and asks his teacher what happened to him. The Patriarch explained to him that the serpent was controlled by a sorceress. If not for her, he would have won. Hansu is furious. He asks the teacher, did he really carry him fleeing? The Patriarch replies that he said it was a strategic retreat. Hansu is very angry and upset by the Patriarch's action. However, the Patriarch told Hansu that there was nothing to worry about. He told him that that warrior woman had come to the rescue. And now she's bravely fighting the monster. After hearing this, Hansu's eyes glistened with rage as he shouted that this was his prey and he wouldn't let anyone take it away. But the Patriarch quickly grounded Hansu. He told him that with such an exhausted body, a battle was out of the question now. The Patriarch also reminded the guy that he needs meditation and energy circulation right now. Hansu asked his teacher what kind of warrior came to the rescue. The teacher told him that it was the leader of the Red Lion Guild, Hurak. The Patriarch is confident that this girl can definitely handle the sorceress and her snake toy. There is nothing to worry about, he said. But Hansu kept saying that this was his business. He was a chul and he had to see it through. The teacher reminded him that his body couldn't take it. Then Hansu got to his feet and started telling the teacher that he had lost his parents to monsters, that his brother was in the hospital, and that he wouldn't give up. Then the Patriarch thought for a moment. He saw talent in the guy, but he didn't expect that he could have such a fighting spirit. Seeing the fire in Hansu's eyes, the Patriarch said there was a way. Hansu wanted to know what that way was, and the Patriarch warned him that this method has serious consequences. You have to think it over carefully and make the right decision. Meanwhile, Hurak continued her battle with the sorceress and the serpent, but she really doesn't like fighting on the water. The Patriarch began to perform the ritual. He told Hansu that this was his opportunity to get a taste of the power that would await him in the future. He also warned the guy that his time was limited and he should not forget that he was mortal. Meanwhile, Hurak bravely held the defense. She's going to roast that giant snake alive. Hansu is painfully enduring the Patriarch's way. He feels like he's about to be torn apart by so much energy. The sorceress can't believe her eyes. She says she didn't expect to meet her equal. The Lord will be furious. She tried to do something against Hurak, but the huntress told her that such tricks wouldn't work. And as soon as the sorceress came into the huntress' sight, she asked her if the huntress had sensed her worm was in danger and had climbed out. Hurak used one of her strongest techniques, and she managed to destroy the sorceress. The Patriarch had finally finished his ritual. Hansu now had the temporary ability of the heavenly demon body activated. After defeating the sorceress, the huntress asked the worm what it would do without its chiller. But the worm tried to get away from her. She tried to catch up with him and realized why there was no point in her buying expensive shoes. She had to take off her shoes and run barefoot. At one point, she got tired of being ceremonious with that snake. She ordered the immediate evacuation of all citizens around her. A couple minutes later came the notification from her colleagues that all citizens around had been evacuated, the area cleared. At that time, Hurak gathered herself into a lump and gathered all her power in her body. She kept repeating that she was one of the 9 S-class hunters on this planet. The huntress unclenched her body and erupted like an atomic bomb. She shouted to the serpent that she had blown up all the buildings around it and it had nowhere else to run. Hurak was already close to her goal. She was sure that just a little more and the worm would become a corpse. However, Hansu stops her on her way to her goal and tells her to wait. The huntress's eyes instantly became angry. At this time, Na is running around the city with thoughts that Hansu can't do it alone since he has no experience in combat at all. Running past a stall, she noticed cast iron weights on sale and thought that was just what she needed for the fight. She quickly bought a few pieces and ran on in her haste, even forgetting to pick up the change. Na used her abilities to easily spin the kettlebells in circles in the air like feathers. She then grabbed one of the weights and flew into the air with it at an incredibly high speed. At this time Hurak doesn't understand at all what Hansu has lost here. She asks him why he came and the guy tells her that he's going to finish off the snake. But it doesn't work that way, the girl answered him. She says that the worm actually pissed her off, too. Hurak is very bright. She offered the guy the opportunity to destroy the serpent for his promise to join the guild. Huntress noticed that Hansu is somehow very charged. She knows he's talented, but he looked like a taut string. Before she knew it, Hansu was gone. The girl didn't even notice him moving away. Hansu got as close to the snake as possible and began to apply crushing blows from the sky. Obviously, the serpent now stands no chance in front of such incredible strength and power. The Patriarch watched the battle. He marvels at the unimaginable he was able to increase Hansu's stamina to. But one thing remained incomprehensible to the teacher, how the student had managed to grasp a part of the heavenly demon's muscle memory as well, which was passed down from generation to generation. Hansu began to apply the 3rd level of crushing blows from the heavens. He was filled with the strongest energy, and then he makes such a blow that chops the monster's head literally in 2 pieces. An unimaginable energy of unimaginable power was in Hansu's body. The monster began to tear apart from different directions. Its body was in numerous wounds from which blood was pouring out in streams. Hurak didn't understand how such a thing was even possible. She had never imagined that this guy's strength was so immense. At this time, Na arrives on a gyre. Hurak was shocked by her appearance, but teased that she was late for something. Na's face was filled with emotion as she asked the huntress, was it really Hansu? At this time, Hansu's temporary ability awakening stopped. He didn't expect the effect to be so short. But then the unexpected happened. The guy started coughing up blood, his strength left him altogether, and he started flying down. Na and Hurak instantly rushed to his aid and flew down to keep him from crashing to death. The Patriarch watched from the sidelines and was amazed at how his apprentice managed to snag 2 of the best beauties. Meanwhile, the girl Yoon was finally able to meet her little brother and sister. Archer delivered the girl to her family and called the Panther to find out how things were going at the event center. The Panther reported that their situation was improving little by little, and that the leader of the Red Lions had dealt with the sorceress. He also told the girl that the snake had been destroyed by that unknown hunter. The archer was not particularly happy about this news. The archer said goodbye to Yun and her family, and headed towards the Panther. Yun was very grateful to the girl and wished her to take care of herself. The next day, Hansu woke up in the hospital. He didn't wake up completely on his own, but the Patriarch had asked him several times if he was going to get up. Hansu began to ask his teacher what had happened to him. The Patriarch told him that his poor memory kept failing him, but still told the guy that he had passed out after applying crushing blows from the heavens. And then the Patriarch became furious. He started yelling at his disciple because he dared to use his crushing blows from the sky. Hansu replied that he didn't remember anything. The argument was interrupted by a knock on the door. The female visitors had come to visit Hansu. Of course, it was Lee Mina and Hurak. Meanwhile, the hunters are busy trying to capture and kill off all of the remaining mermaids. A local media outlet interviews the guild leader of the Three Unity Guild, Choi Hyun. The girl asks for comments on the situation. Choi Hyun talks about how they are cleaning up the area of the city, especially in the sewers and tunnels. The guild reports that the townspeople can rest easy, they will find and kill each of the fishermen. At this time, Hyun-soo came to his senses and was surrounded by the girl's care. Hurak tried to feed him apples, and Lee Mina resented him because she peeled those apples. Because of this, Hurak called her petty. The rivalry between the girls reached a high level, but then Lee Mina remembered that she had something to show Hyun-soo. She took out a black mysterious box. The contents of this box were dazzling in their brightness. A very beautiful and mysterious object. Hyun-soo didn't immediately realize what it was and asked the girls. Hurak replied that it was his highest reward for the battle. The Patriarch couldn't believe his eyes. "Elixir," he shrieked. "This is the heart of a monster," Lee Mina explained. The Patriarch told the lad that he had never before encountered an elixir of such incredible power. Lee Mina continued to tell me that monster hearts were a substance left behind after the death of a rather ancient monster. It contained great power. Hurak advised the young man to eat the monster's heart. She assured him that his performance would increase significantly afterwards. Such a heart could give him a grade 1 promotion. She also added that this serpent was not that big, however, if it has such a heart, it is very ancient. The Patriarch licked himself from such prey. He knows that this elixir contains 500 years of chi energy charge. Hyun asked why they were giving him this incredible artifact. Hurak advised to think that they were just being kind. Lee Mina told Hyun-soo that they still need to know how to consume the heart properly. She offered to tell him that when he checked out and came to their office. Hearing that, Hurak asked why he would do that when he had her. After all, she's an S-class hunter and she should know better. At that time, a real argument started between the girls. Lee Mina said that her method gave a minimum of 25% force absorption. Hurak promised 35%, and the teacher claimed that his method was unique and gave at least 70% force absorption. Class S doesn't give any knowledge about force absorption, shouted Lee Mina. What can a girl who has never been one know anyway, objected Hurak. The Patriarch liked to watch such a show from the sidelines, he called it a tigress fight. He even asked Hyun-soo who he was going to marry. The guy, of course, didn't appreciate such humor. Evening came, the girls calmed down a bit and went to their corners. Lee Mina decided to take the chance to talk to Hyun-soo, but the hottie decided to eavesdrop. Lee Mina tells the guy that they made changes to the contract and this is his chance, there may not be such an opportunity in the future. But her thoughts were treacherous. She realized that Hyun-soo would have no trouble rising to S grade and she needed to recruit him sooner rather than later, then the association situation would be saved. Hyun-soo scrutinized the document, but did not reach a final verdict. As Lee Mina was leaving the room, Hurak followed her to Hyun-soo's room. She grabbed the guy's sore leg and asked him if he liked the association's offer. The Patriarch is sure that these two enchantresses would convince him to sign the treaty, even though he doesn't need to. Hurak said she had no doubt that the association had offered attractive terms, and she continued that they probably also offered immunity from criminal liability for killing people. "Is that a guess?" she asked Hyun-soo. Then Hyun-soo asked the huntress how she knew about it. She replied that it was obvious. An awakened S-class doesn't need immunity, she said. And she argued that those with nuclear weapons or money have the power in their time. The authorities are S-class hunters, the girl continued, and who would hand out immunity of right to them, it's ridiculous. The Patriarch was in agreement with her. She assures Hyun-soo that the only thing he needs now, before he's grown to S-class, is patronage. The patronage of the Red Lion Guild, Hurak, cried out the huntress. The choice was left to Hansu alone. Hurak finished and left the room, meeting Lee Mi-nu in the hallway and wishing her good luck. The girl was really pissed off. Lee Mi-na walked in on Hansu and he said he was sorry, but she told him that it couldn't be helped, she wouldn't force it. The girl wished him a good recovery. But Hansu interrupted her and asked if he could ask the association to help him. The next day came, meanwhile Yoon woke up her brother and sister to wash up and have breakfast. The girl told her little ones that it was her day off and it was time for her to leave for her part-time job. The kids brushed their teeth in the bathroom and pondered why they couldn't sleep longer and then have breakfast already, and they came to the conclusion that ordinary people just don't survive in this world. At that time, the danger was right under their noses. There was a mermaid swimming in the bathtub, literally a few meters away from the kids. He spotted his prey. Yoon was making breakfast and heard strange sounds coming from the bathroom. She realized it was a monster. She needed to take action. The frightened little ones ran out of the bathroom. They were followed by a huge mermaid who was ready to devour them. The monster grabbed the little girl with his huge hands. The little girl was frightened and called for help. Yoon made an instant decision. She took a kitchen knife and pounced on the monster to protect her children. Brave Yoon ran at the monster several times bigger than her with weapon in hand. There was only one goal in her mind. The girl stuck a knife into the mermaid's body, and blood spurted out. She managed to distract the monster's attention, but still, the mermaid pushed her away, and Yoon fell to the ground. She couldn't help her sister anymore. Russell switched his attention back to the little girl, and decided to continue what he had started without interference. But then Lee Mi-na bursts into the room. She came from nowhere and flew in on her kettlebell. She crashed right into the mermaid, and he dropped the girl. Now he realized that there was a battle to be fought with the huntress. Lee Mi-na raised all the stabbing and cutting objects in the house into the air with a wave of her hand, and pointed them at the monster. The girl managed to overpower the mermaid. She wished him to go straight to hell to her relatives. Yoon didn't know how to thank Lee Mi-nu, but she asked how she knew they needed help. She replied that Hyun-soo had asked her to do so. At this time, the doctors at the hospital where Hyun-soo is lying were inquiring about his well-being. The boy told them that his body was still heavy, but that he was no longer in pain and had no sharp sensations. The doctor was amazed at such a fast recovery even though Hyun-soo is a hunter. This is the first time he's seen such a speed of recovery. Hyun-soo could finally check out. He headed to the cashier's office to pay the bills, but there he learned that the Red Lion Guild had already paid everything. This news stunned him. The boy decided to share the news with the Patriarch. The teacher told him that Hurak took very good care of his people, but Hyun-kook couldn't help but think that the girl had paid his bills, and she probably didn't have much money left. The guy decided to return the favor. He couldn't accept such a gesture from a girl. But as soon as he opened the phone, his mouth opened so wide that the Patriarch thought he was jammed. Hyun-soo had never seen so many zeros in his account before in his life, and he couldn't believe what was happening. He had $600 million in his account. The Patriarch asked him what he was so happy about in general. The guy explained that the initial payment amounted to $600 million. The teacher began to say that his student had lost his mind from so much gold. Hyun-soo replied that he just didn't know what it was like to be a beggar. Hyun-soo asked, how could he know that at all if he didn't get to see ramyun in the store every day and be unable to afford it? Just then, the teacher grabs him by the scruff of the neck, applies the heavenly demon flight, and yells that they have a very urgent matter. The guy started asking what was so urgent. It turned out that the teacher just really wanted a ramyun. Having done all their business, the teacher and student went to continue their studies. The teacher told him that absorbing the elixir would give a 10% chi energy boost equal to 20 years. And he also said that if Hyun-soo learns his methodology, the figure will rise to 70%, which equals 140 years. And afterward, the Patriarch asked the young man what he planned to do when he gained such power. After the teacher's words, Hyun-soo began to recall the events that happened 2 years ago when the portals opened. He shared with the teacher that the portals had taken many human lives, and he, just like Yoon, had lost his parents. But now he knows he's a hunter, and he won't let any more people go through that kind of grief. And then the Patriarch shared a thought with the guy that maybe the invasion of monsters is the network of the arrival of the Great Hordes, which told him his ancestors. Hyun-soo inquired as to the Great Horde. And the Patriarch asked if he remembered the techniques he had taught him. And then the Patriarch said that the heavenly demons passed down their divine skill from generation to generation. And it was the first heavenly demon who started it. He said it was all for the sake of one day fighting back the great hordes. But Hansu interrupted the teacher and said that the problem is that this prediction is not from his dimension. It is, the Patriarch replied. And he said that was the very reason he wanted to return home. At that time, Li Mina flew to Hansu's house. She needed to report what happened at Yun's house, but the guy wasn't answering his phone. The Patriarch made Hansu eat the heart of the monster, but the guy didn't understand how he could swallow it. The Patriarch reminded him that if he hadn't been his teacher, he would have eaten that elixir piece by piece and nothing would have come out of it except what comes out in the latrine. Hansu finally made up his mind and took a bite of the elixir. Li Mina decided to check if the front door was open. The door was unlocked and the girl entered. She couldn't reach anyone. And then the portal from which the Patriarch had once appeared caught her eye. Hansu put the monster's heart in his mouth, and the Patriarch told him to listen to him. The teacher said that if he made a mistake, he would stay alive, but he wouldn't be able to stand up again. The Patriarch said to start with the inner shell and stop treating the elixir as food. It is necessary to tune into its energy. Then, when Hansu encompasses the heart with his inner gaze, one should slowly move it first to the Dantian and then to the Weilu point, the Patriarch continued. Then the guy took his time, very slowly and concentrated, and moved the elixir to the Baihui point. Li Mina looked at the black hole at this time and couldn't understand, how long did it take to not clean the house for a mold that resembled a portal to grow? The girl decided not to leave it just like that. Li Mina prepared water and cleaning agent to get rid of the black mold on the wall. But suddenly a call came to her phone. The girl was looking for the head manager of the branch. She said she was out of the office but would come immediately. Li Mina thought that it was a pity that she couldn't wash away all this horror right now. She needed to go to the office urgently. The Patriarch continued to prompt the guy that he now needed to move the energy of the elixir into the outer shell of his energy field. It occurred to the teacher that the heart energy of the slain serpent, strangely enough, appeared to be a fiery yang energy. He didn't expect these portals, as they are called, to contain monsters of incredible power. But so much the better for them. After all, Hansu would have to change his polarity to yang later, so it was a good thing. The Patriarch said that the heavenly demon's martial art is the quintessence of yang energy. Meanwhile, the degree of the elixir substance level had reached 32%. Hansu clearly followed his teacher's instructions. The Patriarch warned that once the elixir had completely dissolved into his aura, he needed to concentrate it back into his inner shell and not let it escape. It was more complicated than Hansu had anticipated. The elixir was trying to leave his body, soul, and aura. The Patriarch shouted for him to bear with it, for a seed of heavenly demon power was sprouting within him. The degree of the elixir had reached 60%. When the degree reached 70%, jets of blood poured out from every possible orifice of Hansu's body. The Patriarch did not interfere and only watched from the side. He knew that his disciple was now in a deep trance. But the Patriarch expected 70%, not 80%. He knew he had to continue as long as he could, but he did not understand how this measurement gives such opportunities. The degree of the elixir had reached 90%, but Hansu didn't stop. He wanted another 10%. Jets of blood flowed from his eyes, mouth, and nose. The Patriarch was proud of his student. He said he would help him finish what he had started. Teacher applied primordial chi. He wanted to help Hansu release energy as much as possible. Hansu's body completely changed its original appearance. And finally that flash exploded, the elixir giving off energy. Hansu completely absorbed the elixir, his body reaching peak yang energy. He became immune to the thermal effects. Now Hansu would be able to learn the techniques of any individual once a day. But after that energy attack, he just collapsed without any energy at all. Meanwhile, chaos reigned in one of the city's hospitals. Some were referred to intensive care, others needed immediate drainage of water from their lungs. Because of the huge number of victims, there were not enough beds. The hospital was full, with doctors and nurses running from one to another. Li Mina arrived at the hospital. She had nowhere to even set foot. The injured were both on the floor and at the entrance of the facility. It was all because of the fish people. The girl found Yun's room and went in to see how she was feeling and to give some important information. Lee Mi-na told her that her brother and sister were transferred due to lack of beds. They are now at Sa Song Medical Center. But she assured her that they were fine. Yun asked how her babies were feeling, but Lee Mi-na shocked her with the news that they hadn't regained consciousness yet. The girl told Yun not to worry because it's one of the symptoms after the fishmen attack. She's sure the doctors will do everything they can to help. Lee Mi-na left the room and tried to call Hyun-soo a few more times, but all attempts were futile. But the girl was also gnawing at the thought of Yun not being in a coma. How could this happen if she was the one who was hurt the most? She understood why Sister Yun still hadn't woken up, for the girl had fainted from fear. But Brother Yun was not touched by the fish man, so why are both of them in a coma right now? This is all very strange, Lee Mi-na thought. Meanwhile, the Red Lion Guild estimated the damage to the city at 1 billion won. HF Hurak reported 117 casualties, with more coming in every minute. The man also said that doctors have noticed an unexplained condition in those who arrive after a mermaid attack. People fall into a coma. Hurak asked the reason for this condition, but was told that the doctors were still sorting it out. After hearing that, the girl decided to call Hyun-soo, but he didn't pick up the phone. This made her angry. He had just joined the guild and he didn't answer the leader's calls. Hurak's anger turned out to be no nonsense. She was pissed off that he didn't respond after she sent him a salary of 600 million won. At this time in one of the bars, Haxon the S-class hunter and part-time guild leader of the experienced Shadow Guild was having a conversation with Jill. Jill is also an S-class hunter. He is the only one of the hunters who is not affiliated with any guild. Huxon asked Jill, did the Red Lion woman end up taking Hyun-soo? He didn't understand how Hurak had managed to snag him. Huxon said he would have killed that rookie, but Gil told him to cut him some slack and suggested that he could live in peace, without war. This infuriated Huxon. He said that he would rather kill Hyun-soo than let the Red Lion Guild rise up. At this time, Hyun-soo has the most beautiful dream. He is on the beach surrounded by beautiful women. Lee Mi-na comes up to him in a swimsuit and asks him if he's tired. Then Hurak walks up in the same form with another hottie. She tells Hyun-soo to stop sleeping and go play beach volleyball. They started a game and set a condition that whoever loses pays for lunch. And then comes the first serve from Hurak. Hyun-soo can't get his bearings and catches the ball with his face. Lee Mi-na started to worry about him, and Hurak yelled that he couldn't even hit a serve like that. Hyun-soo justified that it was his first time playing volleyball. The ball rolled straight into the sea, and Hyun-soo had to swim after it. He didn't understand how the ball could have gotten so far, and just as the guy got to the ball and picked it up, the very same serpent appeared in front of him. The snake attacked Hyun-soo and demanded his elixir back. And then there was underwater lava underneath the water. The serpent managed to overpower Hyun-soo. He fell stone first into the deep sea, straight into the boiling lava. Hyun-soo jumped up in a cold sweat and saw his teacher in front of him. The Patriarch instantly demanded that his ramen be boiled. The teacher also told him that the big hand on the plate had passed the number 12 5 times already while he was asleep. Hyun-soo slept for 2.5 days. He immediately started calling the Red Lion Association and Guild. When the guy told Lee Mi-na that he had eaten the elixir by himself, she said he was crazy, because he could have died if he didn't follow the association method. After that, Hyun-soo also told Hurak about what had happened, and she thanked him for at least staying alive if he didn't want to follow her method. The boy was pleased that Hurak reacted much more calmly than he had expected. During the call, he fed the teacher ramen. After that, the guy saw his level increase, and now once a day he can perform a technique he wasn't taught. The Patriarch replied that there is no such thing, and even if such a superpower exists, it sounds dishonest. The teacher wanted to give him an instructive flick, but he dodged it. Hyun-soo said that his forehead was now a slapping ground. Meanwhile, Yoon sobbed in the hospital that maybe her brother and sister would never regain consciousness. She shared her grief with Hyun-soo. The guy calmed the girl down and said that they would definitely come to their senses. The girl thought that they even looked something like him. Then Hyun-soo led Yoon to his brother Hyuntae's room. He shared his grief with her and told her that he was also in a coma. Hyun-soo says that ever since they crashed the car, Hyuntae has never regained consciousness. The doctors can't answer why. Then the girl took Hyuntae's hand and introduced herself. She said that Hansu had done a lot for her. She continued that she didn't know if he could hear her and relayed that Hansu was really looking forward to his return. She asked him to come back as soon as possible. Suddenly, the Patriarch told Hansu that there was a very strange aura coming from his brother. It was something he hadn't felt in a long time. He revealed that there was a curse seal on his brother's heart. This shocked Hansu and he asked what to do about it. The Patriarch replied that there is still one way around the seal, but it is a very questionable method. Meanwhile, an auction was being held at a museum in the city. There was a skeletal spear on display, with an original price of 70 million won. An Aegis Guild leader named Choi raised the price to 80 million won. He had his eye on this spear a long time ago. The spear was already almost in his pocket, but no sooner had the girl counted to 3 than Jin Shi interrupted the price. Choi got very angry and called Jin Shi a goat in his thoughts. There was no limit to his anger. A happy Jin Shi walked to his car with a new purchase in his hands. He had enjoyed this productive day. Like all of a sudden Choi came up to him and said he's completely crazy to pay 200 million won for a thing that cost 70 million. And then Jin Shi replied to him that he wouldn't spare 300 million for that. He also asked him to be honest, what did he lose at the auction? If Choi's heart sinks at the mere sight of the 200 million price tag, then he clearly doesn't belong there. Jin Shi continued and advised him to go home and eat ramyun. Choi didn't tolerate such remarks and used one of his techniques. He prepared for battle. Jin Shi was even happy about it. He said that it was an excuse to try out his acquisition on someone who was a troublemaker himself. Choi only laughed and said that he would now see for himself that the weapon was only worth 70 million and no more. His opponent advised him not to try to appear cooler than he really was, because he was already dead. A veritable massacre breaks out, and Choi informs his new enemy that whether he knows it or not, no one has ever walked away alive having outbid him in an auction. At the Red Lion Guild, an angry Hurak asked Choi if he was going to keep causing such problems. She explained to him that she had been flooded with complaints about him. But Choi replied that he couldn't help but be angry, because that man had just come and taken an item from him at an auction. Hurak ordered him to shut up immediately, and if he continued, she would not be crucified. She warned him that if he caused trouble again, she would tear him into small pieces and burn him. Hurak chased him away and told him to stay out of her sight today. But Choi couldn't just walk away. He asked when they were going to introduce him to that new hunter. To which Hurak replied that it was none of his business. At this time in the hospital, Yun wondered to Hyunsu if he had now become as powerful a hunter. Hyunsu replied to the girl that he didn't think becoming awakened had any fixed time frame. This was all very interesting to Yun. She told him that it wouldn't be surprising if only someone high up helped him with it, otherwise it's unrealistic. Hyunsu only laughed. The guy suggested that Yun go rest at home and he would look after her babies and his brother. The girl agreed. Hyunsu went to his brother Hyungtae's room. He asked the Patriarch again about the way to bypass the seal. The Patriarch answered him that this method was called chopping heaven's tongue, but warned him that he could not use it now. Hyunsu asked what the reasons were. The teacher said that it was a secret technique that was a type of sorcery invented by one of the heavenly demons. He claimed that Hyunsu wouldn't be able to use it since he didn't possess the body of a heavenly demon. But Hyunsu immediately interrupted him, and said that he could use it because his level of listening to instructions had increased, and he could repeat one of his techniques once a day. Afterward, Hyunsu walked over to his brother who had been lying in a coma for a long time and extended his hand in front of his body, and he started using the heavenly demon's chopping tongue technique. And it really started to work. The Patriarch was surprised by this. He still didn't understand how this was possible and what this ability was. Hyunsu tried his best, and he could feel his brother's heart beating at a new speed. But suddenly, everything stopped abruptly. It didn't work out. Hyunsu asked his teacher why it didn't work. The Patriarch replied that he just didn't have enough strength yet. He also added that he senses the power of an incredibly powerful being here, and it will not be easy to deal with. Meanwhile, Huxin and Jill continued to argue. Huxin was looking for strong hunters to destroy Hyunsu. Jill tried to dissuade him with all his might. At that time, someone knocked on their door, and asked what was the commotion. It was Takashi, an S-class hunter, vice leader of the AES Guild. Over a few beers, they shared the situation with Takashi, and he replied that that was why he didn't work for Huxon. Gil asked Huxon what was wrong with that fragment this time, to which he replied that, like last time, there was only a desolate desert. Gil suggested he look for fragments in Korea, but Huxon replied that it was entrusted to the Red Lions, we'd have to wait and see. And then Jill told him that the appearance of a new hunter, Hansu, might advance the search. Huxon agreed that there would probably be an expedition soon. Jill said that if the boss of heaven, the ancestor of the dragons, then the portals scattered around the world are fragments of heaven. Collecting all the fragments in a year is like a curse. It was about a prediction that said that if people didn't collect all the fragments in a year, this world would face calamities that even S-class hunters couldn't handle. Huxon said they should find all the fragments in a year, whatever it took. Jill backed him up and said they needed more high-ranking hunters. Meanwhile, Hyun-soo was at the hospital in Baby Yoon's room. The doctor told him that they did everything they could, but they never recovered. Hyun-soo noticed that there are many patients like him in this room. They can't all come out of their comas. The Patriarch said that the reason is because of the cold energy that dwells here. All these people met the waterman. The teacher explained that creatures underwater originally carry Yin energy. And these water bastards have a particularly strong energy. The Patriarch continued that this is why those with high Yin energy cannot accept it. When their energy and water energy collide, it combines and becomes cold energy. Then Hyun-soo asked the teacher, could there be some way to cure this hibernation? But he didn't have to wait for the teacher to answer either. He realized that if he used the yang energy to remove the yin energy, everyone would wake up. Then Hyun-soo went to the sleeping babies and began to apply yang energy. It was like he was clawing the black energy out of them. The Patriarch ordered him to burn yin energy, but Hyun-soo thought that if he absorbed that energy. But the teacher started yelling that his body is at extreme yang, doesn't he know what will happen to him if he absorbs this energy? Hyun-soo disobeyed his teacher and started absorbing yin energy. The Patriarch called him a brat, how dare he disobey? Meanwhile, Hyun-soo was able to absorb the power of yin. His body went from extreme yang to the harmony of yin and yang. The Patriarch could not believe if he had managed to reach the peak blooming of the three flowers. This is impossible, he thought. Even though it was only for a moment, the teacher was certain that he had seen Hyun-soo reach the peak blooming stage of the three flowers in a trance. When Hyun-soo came to his senses, he asked the Patriarch what it meant to have a body with yin and yang harmony. The teacher explained that a body with harmony of yin and yang, superior to both the body of extreme yin and extreme yang. Hyun-soo then went over to help everyone in the room. The doctors were shocked. Hyun-soo also helped Baby Yoon, they finally came to their senses. Yoon burst into tears of happiness. Meanwhile, Lee Mi-na was telling her subordinate to tell them to increase the number of hospital beds. The number of comatose patients grew so rapidly that there were no hospital beds left at all. And then the girl received a call. She was told that Hyun-soo began to bring people out of coma. He has already helped more than half of the patients. People thanked Hyun-soo, saying that God had sent him to them. Hyun-soo went to every room in the hospital. Patients and their relatives said what an amazing hunter Hyun-soo is, he has such an ability. Many people wanted to take pictures with him. The Patriarch was proud of his disciple. He told the kid that as a heavenly demon, he should be used to such treatment. Hyun-soo received a call from his guild head. He said he was in the hospital right now, but Hurak replied that she was already aware of it. She said that the association sent them a request for help with hospitals. And they also sent a check with payment for it. The head also said that Hyun-soo could have the whole amount for himself. But the guy wondered how, since he was just a member of the guild. Hurak explained that if he does something of his own free will and it has nothing to do with the guild, then the payment is completely his. Hyun-soo promised to stop by the association when he was done. Hurak praised the guy, saying that the association would now be under their authority. She said he could take it as a compliment from the guild leader. Night falls, at which time Huxon receives a call, informing him that they have found out where Hyun-soo lives. Huxon ordered the address to be sent to him immediately. Jill was sound asleep at the time and unaware of what was happening. Huxon left the lodge and used the ability to get to Hyun-soo's house as soon as possible. Morning came, and it started at Hyun-soo's place with the Patriarch demanding ramyun again. He was annoyed that the teacher didn't get tired of eating it. Suddenly, Hansu gets a call from the head of the guild. The guy answers and asks why he's getting a call at this hour. The head asked him where he was right now. The guy replied that he was at home going to make ramyeon. A shout came from the phone, "Get out of there immediately." Hurak started screaming that something very strong was approaching his house right now. The guy instantly ran outside to survey the area and be ready for anything. It was Huxin. He landed right outside Hyunsu's house and said it was time for the rookie hunter to die. He directed an incredibly powerful technique at Hyunsu. An arrow of tremendous energy and killing power flew in his direction. At this time, intelligence in the association said that, as expected, an unidentified living organism is currently in the area of Hyunsu's house. Lee Mina and Hurak are on the phone. Lee Mina says that supersonic speed is very rare even among S-class hunters. Hurak agreed with her and said she thought it was Huxin because that bastard hates her to the core. Hurak thanked Lee Minu for the information, and said that she was the only one who could stop Huxin. Lee Mina immediately got ready to head there as well. But the general manager of the association entered the room and told her not to go there. He said that from the looks of it, there would be a battle of S-class hunters and it was pointless for her to go there. The CEO said that the association still wouldn't stay away. They had already asked the Azure Dragon Squad to start preparations to use the Mirror World item. The Azure Dragon Squad was heading to the center of events. The squad was made up of a bee, an ant, a cheetah, and a commander-in-chief. The commander-in-chief warned the guys that this is S-rank, and it's a completely different level from what it used to be. He contacted Falcon and asked if the Mirror World item was from him. The Falcon confirmed and said it was on its way. He spread his wings, taking on the appearance of a bird, and went to Hyunsu's house as well. Meanwhile, Hyunsu held his defenses against Huxin. Huxin had no idea that he had reached the harmony of yin and yang. He realized that Hyunsu had reached the realm of evolution. The Patriarch looked at his disciple and realized that the power he felt from Hyunsu was much stronger than what he felt from Hurak. Teacher realized that Hyunsu had reached the realm of the highest peak where the Patriarch came from. Hyunsu asked Huxin why he came out of nowhere and attacked him. And then Hyunsu heard a strange sound, as if there was an accident somewhere nearby. He asked everyone to leave immediately. The Patriarch told him to focus immediately because he had a battle to fight. This was not the time to be distracted by what was going on around him. Huxin was much stronger than all of Hyunsu's previous enemies. The Patriarch felt it too. Hyunsu was surprised at how many abilities Huxin had. His body is covered in metal and he shoots energy bullets. And that's when Huxin used a supersonic strike of 3 strokes. His main goal was to destroy Hyunsu at all costs. Hyunsu felt defeated. His body was thrown back and he couldn't move. The guy couldn't feel his right arm. He never thought he would end up like this after receiving his internal energy. Huxin didn't stop. He approached Hyunsu to apply a supersonic strike of 5 swings. The Patriarch reminded his disciple that was it really for nothing that he was learning how to move the heavenly demon. Hyunsu's listening for instructions activated. Hyunsu finally came to his senses and began to apply the movement of the heavenly demon's second technique and then the flight of the heavenly demon. Hurak meanwhile flew to the center of events as fast as she could. She hoped they hadn't collided yet. But still, she wondered how long Hyunsu would last against Huxin if they did clash. Hurak assumed that Hyunsu would last about 10 or 20 seconds, but most likely it would be over in an instant, so she decided she had to hurry. Hyunsu, meanwhile, was holding on just fine. Huxin even thought it was strange, because he thought he would finish him off in just one punch. The Patriarch, observing from the side, concluded that even though his disciple's comprehension level was not that high, he was able to attack Huxin right away. He considered him strong and was proud of him. But also, the Patriarch realized that if Hyunsu couldn't overcome such a test, then he most likely wouldn't be able to grow as a heavenly demon. Huxin prepared to deliver the decisive blow and even told Hyunsu that he admired how long he lasted. But suddenly Hyunsu opened his eyes and told Huxin not to talk so much. He gathered energy into a ball and applied a seed strike. Hyunsu pierced with a punch that sent Huxin flying backwards. Huxin didn't think his punch would be so strong. Huxin looked at his hand and realized that Hyunsu had destroyed his reinforcement. This is impossible, he thought. This angered Huxin greatly and he applied the silver pulse. The Patriarch was surprised that his recovery was at the level of demonic monsters. The Patriarch told Hansu not to give him a break and to use the wood strike to destroy his insides. Hansu began to apply the Deva kick, and said that he would slowly destroy every transmutation of Haxan. And then Hansu saw water in front of him. He thought that whether Haxan vaporized from the impact of the tree. But the Patriarch said he could still feel his energy. He was alive. The Patriarch prompted that Haxan was now right underneath him and ready to deliver a mighty blow. Haxan suddenly jumped out, grabbed Hansu by the hair, and promised to kill him painlessly. However, Hansu replied that he couldn't do that to him. He used the technique of hitting a leaf. Haxan was seriously wounded. He couldn't believe his eyes that this brat had managed to injure him. Hansu noticed that he was starting to recover again. He thought that he should have destroyed him immediately with a series of attacks. But the guy realized that it was too dangerous, because there were so many people around. And he realized that today was a day off and he had to get to the school, which was obviously empty. Hansu assumed that since the school was on high ground, he should be able to minimize the damage as much as possible. Meanwhile, Haxan realized that he had a serious wound, and even using the silver pulse wouldn't completely repair it. Hansu had already climbed to the top floor and was glad that fortunately there was no one there. So this was his opportunity. Suddenly, Haxan flew up and taunted that Hansu was desperately trying to protect others. He threw a punch and Hansu flew away. Haxan told him that someone like him fights even in residential neighborhoods. And the guy replied that they had no right to be hunters then. Haxan was already starting to think that killing Hansu was pathetic. And who would have thought this guy would last this long? While Hansu was lying powerless from Haxan's punch, Haxan was already preparing a powerful killing blow for him, and said to blame it all on his boss, the guild leader. And then there was a massive explosion, the kind of thing you can't survive. Haxan used his most powerful technique. Through the ash and smoke, Haxan became visible, hovering in the air above the school. He said that this country sucked at skill evaluation. This guy should have been given an A rank, but not an S rank. And then behind his back, Hansu asked, should he go back then? This guy surprised Haxan again. Haxan told him that he would burn it until it turned to ash. But then he realized that his bullet energy had suddenly disappeared. This had never happened before. However, he knew that in any case, his body could still function normally. Haxan shouted that this was the end, and they both pushed their most powerful forces. Only one must survive. Hansu applies the heaven-destroying demonic fists of the second technique, and at the same time the seed strike. 5 days ago, Hansu was practicing and learning new techniques with his teacher, the Patriarch telling him that he needed to listen while he circulated his energy. His teacher told him that he has both the heavenly demon seed and also an incredible internal Imugi energy. But he can't use them properly. Hansu realized that it was true, he had gained more internal energy, but he didn't feel that he had become stronger, except for the high-level recovery. The Patriarch advised him to think of it as a deep well. He said that the strong would be able to bring water 100 times. And the weak will probably not even be able to do it 10 times, he continued. The well will not run out of water. Then Hansu realized that he had to become stronger. The training that will help Hansu become stronger and allow him to use his inner energy is real battles. The Patriarch claimed that victory over a strong opponent is better than any training and many times more effective. And so during his battle with Haxan, Hansu realized that here he was, his first strong opponent right in front of him. But even after 2 seed strikes from Hansu, Haxan could still stand on his feet. The guy was already starting to think he was a monster. Hansu knew that on the other hand, his whole body felt like it was on fire from this attack. Haxan told him who would have thought he could hit him so hard. No wonder the Red Lion wants to take him to his place, Haxan thought. Haxan prepared for the attack and said that although he was called an astral mage, he was ready for close combat as well. He threw a 5-swing punch at Hansu. The guy was defeated again and flew backwards. Haxan yelled to Hansu that he had nowhere to run and would take his head for himself as a talisman. The Patriarch was watching, yelling at Hansu that he's a brat and he needs to get a grip or his head will fall off soon. The Patriarch told him to use the soul of a heavenly demon. Hansu's listening for instructions activated. Hansu's level of understanding of the heavenly demon soul had increased to 65%. His teacher had told him that he would definitely succeed. Even though during his training, Hansu kept telling his teacher that the soul of a heavenly demon was too heavy. The teacher told him at that time that it might be difficult to understand, but it was necessary to think with his head. The Patriarch explained to him during the training that initially one must take one step back and allow one's consciousness to go past that point. During the fight with Huxin, Hansu succeeds in using the heavenly demon's soul technique. He got close to Hansu at an incredible speed. Huxin realized that he couldn't stop it. Hansu threw a few punches and Huxin went down. Hansu fully used all his strength to scoop the water out of the well. From helplessness, he too collapsed to the ground. Hansu thinks it's finally over. But then Huxin shows up and attacks the guy, saying it's his turn. Many centuries ago, there was a battle between a heavenly demon and a magical monster. The celestial demon's task was to destroy this creature no matter what it cost him. The monster said that the celestial demon had exceeded his expectations, for he was the only one left. But the creature knew that the celestial demon had used up most of his strength and would definitely not be able to overpower him anymore. The celestial demon swore by the honor of his fallen brothers that he would tear the skin of the monster, dry it and devour it to appease their souls. The creature said it would give him a chance to be his right hand so they could conquer the world together. The heavenly demon told him to shut up, but the monster said that because he had already definitely used all of his internal energy. However, the celestial replied to him that this martial art could be used by celestial demons without internal energy. He could borrow strength from nature. And then the celestial demon applies the practice of the celestial spiritual body and manages to overpower the creature. A bunch of people gathered around the school where the battle between Hansu and Huxin was currently taking place. No one understood what was going on there. The Azure Dragon squad had already arrived at the location as well. The commander-in-chief ordered them to proceed with utmost caution. He was shocked that an entire zone had already been destroyed, and it all happened in just 20 minutes. The squad knew that Huxin had been hunting Hansu, and assumed the guy was probably already dead. But then, while surveying the area, the commander-in-chief notices that the massacre between them is still going on and Hansu is alive. The battle had been going on for quite some time. Hansu asked Huxin why he even came out of nowhere and attacked him. Huxin replied that he understood what he was talking about. At this time, the commander-in-chief said that Hansu was alive and there was a melee between them. Suddenly, Huxin's energy beam was restored. Now he was renewed and ready to finish what he had started. The Patriarch realized that his disciple needed help immediately. He grabbed Hansu and pushed him away from his opponent's punch. The squad did not understand how they should stop these monsters, because there is a complete madness going on. Huxin noticed that Hansu felt as if someone had pushed him away, but he knew that he'd only have enough for one more attack at most anyway. Suddenly, an association ship flew up to Hansu. Limi Na was telling him to try to get up. The Patriarch at this time shouted to him to get up at once, and that though he was his disciple, he could not continue to help him. Limi Na gave orders to the squad that they must intervene before Hansu dies. The commander-in-chief has heard the order to engage, but now that he sees these hunters in action, he can't bring himself to budge. And then he notices that Hansu is up. It seemed like a miracle or just luck. The Patriarch meanwhile thought that although it wasn't nice to interfere in someone else's fight, he should help Hansu escape. But Hansu didn't give up, even though the Patriarch told him that there was nothing he could do anyway. The guy remembered the skill he had gained through leveling up, aka he could repeat one of the Patriarch's skills once a day. Huxin asked Hansu what he was muttering to himself. The guy replied that he remembered a martial art that he could use without internal energy. Hansu applied the practice of the heavenly spiritual body. The Patriarch was shocked, for he had never taught it to him. Huxin and Hansu directed their energies at each other. The mirror world object interrupted them and absorbed their energies. But not a minute later, the object turned to splinters. Huxin said the association's shenanigans were hopeless. Suddenly, Huxin and Hansu were distracted by the appearance of Hurak. She arrived to help Hansu. She told the guy that he's just an amazing person to have lasted so long against Huxin. Hurak had ordered the Azure Dragon squad to stand behind her, she would take care of everything herself now. Huxin said she's just a dumbass for going it alone. But suddenly, a portal appeared behind Hurak's back, from which Jill and his ally emerged. A week ago in the Gate Committee, the experts summoned the S-class hunters to announce their decision. It was said that guilds that had S-rank hunters in each country would be in charge of heaven. And if the gate shows up in countries without S-ranked hunters, you'll have to choose a guild to go there according to the situation. Huxon said if they are just telling them about their decision, why did they have to call them in the first place? Angry, he asked how this could even happen if humanity's survival depended solely on how strong they were. He affirmed that he and the ES Guild would proceed at their discretion, and for everyone to get it in their heads. Hurak couldn't stand it and told Huxon that they needed to work together to at least have a chance of surviving this disaster and asked him not to go against the tide. Huxon summarized that if he could stop it, then humanity would live, otherwise it would die, that's all. In the meantime, the city was in chaos. People had learned that the gate had opened and thought that monsters were about to come out of it. The squad relayed to the association that 4 S-rank hunters had gathered in one place, and if they started a battle now, there would likely be disaster. Hurak along with Hansu were going to hold the defense against Haxon and his allies, Jill and Takashi. But then the unforeseen happened. Takashi stepped forward and apologized to Hurak for his chapter because he had been foolish again. Hansu remembered seeing Takashi in a magazine before. He is ranked 8th among the S-class hunters of the whole world. Jill at this time told Huxon to see what he had done, and what he was even doing in a foreign country. Jill asked him to stop provoking people because they shouldn't be fighting against each other. And then Hansu realized who he was fighting. He remembered that he had also read about Huxon in the magazine, because he was an S-ranked hunter, ranked 2nd in the world. Huxon has never appeared in newspapers or on television, so no one knows what he looks like. All they know is that he is very violent. Takashi told Hurak that the ES Guild promises to apologize nationally and make amends. Hurak accepted the apology, but Hansu shouted with anger in his eyes that he couldn't forgive such a thing. Hansu began to say that he was attacked for unknown reasons and destroyed the school he went to. But then Jill came up to him and introduced himself. He said he was very happy to meet him. Hansu was surprised that Jill spoke Korean. Gil explained that he can match brainwave lengths to speak different languages. He calmed Hansu down and said that they weren't here to fight, he and Takashi were here to get Huxon. Takashi also approached Hansu and apologized, promising to make it up to him. However, Hansu replied that after this whole mess, apologizing in compensation can't solve anything anymore. He said he needed to follow through with the bastard and asked everyone to get out of the way. But then Hurak intervened. She told Hansu that Takashi is the vice leader of the ES Guild and can be trusted. She said that there were no casualties and that was the end of it. Takashi was at this time explaining to Huxon that this was all an open act of invasion. And even if an army was sent there was nothing they could do or say against them. Takashi took him aside and told him it was time to go home. But Huxon didn't just leave. As he said goodbye, he turned to Hansu, called him baby and offered to finish next time, advising him to get stronger for now. Huxon finally flew away. Takashi breathed out a sigh of relief, and said that they had averted another crisis. Jill and Takashi went home too, telling Hansu goodbye that they hoped they could get along with him in the future. Everyone dispersed and Hurak also exhaled. She only hoped that Hansu wouldn't die, but who would have thought that he would fight Haxon as an equal. Then Hansu, accompanied by the guild leader, went to the hospital. The doctor examined the boy and said that his wounds were healing faster than expected and that it would be over by tomorrow. Hurak turned to Hansu and said that it looks like he got stronger after eating the heart of the snake. Hansu finally took the subway home. The Patriarch asked him why he was using the subway when he could use the Sky Demon flight. The guy replied that he was just really tired. While Hansu was driving, the thought crossed his mind that it was too dangerous to fight near ordinary people. After all, people almost got hurt today. The boy was worried that everyone was worried about the devastation. But as soon as he got to his neighborhood, he saw a perfectly intact school. Unexpectedly, Lee Mina appeared and said that she was very worried about him. The guy didn't expect to see her there. The girl explained to him that the association has a team in charge of restoration and she is here with them to restore the neighborhood. Hansu was overwhelmed with emotion, overjoyed. He hugged the girl and began to thank her. He said he was really worried about the neighborhood as he drove home. Suddenly, people started looking out of the windows and thanking Hansu for saving them. The guy was really embarrassed. Meanwhile, in one of the castles, a man was smoking a pipe and said that the king was unhappy that the Watergate plan had gone awry because of the misjudgment of the monsters. One of his subordinates asked him not to worry because the fragment from the Western Sea of Korea would be enough to destroy them. The man also asked about the parallel plan. The girl replied that it was 72% complete, but if needed he could personally step in and finish everything. Meanwhile, the local news was saying that it had come out that S-rank hunter Huxon was behind the destruction of Davona High School. It was also reported that Huxon entered the country illegally and attempted to attack hunter Hansu, destroying the school in the process. And it was also said that as a result of this, the Guild ES published an official apology and mentioned that they will try to make up for everything as soon as possible. An unknown guy was watching the news. He was very excited about such events and could not contain his emotions. How tough Hyunsu is, survived even after the White Wolf attack, he said. The guy wondered if Hyunsu would survive if he broke his neck. Meanwhile, Hyunsu was doing his morning routine in the bathroom and the Patriarch was hustling him because he wished for ramyun. Hyunsu came out of the bathroom and the Patriarch immediately freaked out. How dare he walk around naked in front of him? Hyunsu laughed and said that they were both men. Hyunsu told the teacher that there would be an expedition tomorrow and he had prepared something special for them. The Patriarch replied that he hoped it was 2 packs of ramyun, but Hyosu said that today they would eat spicy pork with rice. The boy assured the teacher that it was no worse than ramyun. Hyunsu gave a taste of the dish to the teacher. But the Patriarch immediately looked at the boy with an embittered look. The teacher started yelling that he was a bastard and how dare he feed him 1 ramyun when there was such deliciousness. Finally, Hyunsu goes on his first official expedition. He never thought he would become a red lion hunter. Suddenly, someone turned to Hyunsu. When Hyunsu turned around, he almost fainted as he saw Hunter Sun in front of him. Hyunsu happily said hello and said he was a longtime fan of his. Hunter replied that he was a little embarrassed. Sun suggested that they try their best together for the upcoming expedition, since it was Hyunsu's first expedition. Hyunsu gladly agreed. The Patriarch asked the disciple who it was that he almost bowed at his feet and did not faint. Then the boy told the teacher that Hunter Sun is unbreakable and has saved a great number of lives. They call him the Steel God of Death. And then Hyunsu notices another marvelous hunter June. The guy comes over to say hello and June happily reciprocates. The Patriarch also asked about this hunter. The boy said that he was the hunter June, and although he looked skinny, he had monstrous strength and was loved by the people. And the Patriarch immediately gave him a slap on the wrist. He asked why Hyunsu would lower his head so low in front of them like he was their servant. The guy replied that he was just a fan. Then the teacher told him that he was the successor of the heavenly demon, and he should not bow his head to anyone. The Patriarch continued that anyone could stand before him, but he was the successor who would lead the divine heavenly demon cult. After the Patriarch's moralizing, Hyunsu went to Hurak's office. She said she had something to ask him. Seeing Hurak, the guy was surprised to see such a fancy outfit for an expedition. The head looked amazing. Hurak decided not to linger and asked a direct question. She asked Hyunsu if he was going to continue working with her. The boy didn't understand what she meant. And the head explained to him that he had survived the battle against Huxon. She said that even though the assessment showed him to be an A-class hunter, which he may have been originally, but now Hyunsu is clearly an S-rank hunter. Hyunsu's eyes blurred from what he heard. He didn't expect to be evaluated to such a high level. Hurak said that she had promised to help him until he became S-rank, but now that was no longer necessary and the contract was null and void. The girl interrogated what Hyunsu was going to do and if he was going to go further with her. And then Hyunsu replied to her that of course he was going to stay with her and continue the common cause. In his defense, Hyunsu said that he hadn't done anything for the guild yet, much less gotten much for the contract. After that, Hurak thanked the guy, and offered to try her best on the expedition. After all, she was his first after all. The head told him that if he went down to the basement, he would find his outfit with his name on it, and needed to change into it. A marching siren sounded, and all the hunters lined up in rows. Then Hurak came out. She turned to her soldiers. She said it was time to get her hands on a fragment of heaven. Hurak revealed that they would need high-level items as well as healing potions. She continued to encourage her soldiers. Hurak demanded their bravery to protect their comrades and civilians. The Patriarch couldn't contain his emotions and said that although he had always thought Hurak was an impressive woman, she had shown herself as a heroine today. The head ordered each of them to look at the comrade next to them, and be sure they would protect each other. "Go after the fragment," shouted the brave and courageous Hurak to her fighters. At this time, the man who had previously plotted to destroy the expeditionary force and the Red Lion Guild received new news. The girl informed him that an expeditionary force of Red Lions had just arrived at the Western Sea. The man asked what was their military strength. The girl told me that in addition to the S ranks, there are 30 A ranks. The darker man told her not to let her guard down for a second. He claimed that on that day the Red Lion would come to an end and Korea would also disappear from the face of the earth. Meanwhile, the Red Lion troop was already sailing through the sea. Hansu shared with Sun that he was a little nervous because it was his first time in paradise. Then Sun told him that in a two-part expedition, the first had failed. All but the S rank had perished. He continued that although the second part was successful, more than 20 men were killed and most of the squad was wounded. Sun concluded that people go to heaven and die after they know what it is. That is why it is called heaven. Sun warned Hansu that just coming face to face with one of the shards of heaven would make him shake with fear. The Patriarch shared with his disciple that death awaits them at this gate. Hansu realized that if even a teacher was talking about such a thing, then it was definitely incomparable to an ordinary gate. Hurak energized her entire army and gave her words of advice. She told them that the key to saving humanity lay in this gate. All the soldiers rushed to cross the portal. "I finally saw the place with my own eyes." The Patriarch said it was too vast to be an illusion. So the guy asked him to explain what the illusion was. And the Patriarch said that when he was young, he almost died because of the price he had to pay for the illusion. This illusion is known as the Heavenly Guardian, a technique of the mystic dimension, the teacher continued. The Patriarch tells Hansu that if he's right after all, they just need to find the thing that will unravel and destroy the illusion. Hansu didn't see anyone from his squad, and he tried to contact the head, but no one responded. But the Patriarch claimed they weren't alone. Meanwhile, the hunter from the squad was also trying to contact the others, but no one was around. And then he notices a diamond on the ground that looks to be at least 500 carats. The guy thought he was lucky and decided to pick it up. Suddenly, a huge toothy beast burst out of the ground. The diamond turned out to be a trivial bait. The guy had to fight the monster. No matter how many moves and techniques he used, the monster grew larger in size each time. Death was already welcoming him with outstretched arms. But suddenly, someone came to the rescue and used an incredibly strong technique. Hansu came to the rescue. He used a seed strike against the monster, and held the defense decently. Meanwhile, Hurak was flying over the sea. She had no idea that they would be scattered all over the place as soon as they came in. The head assumed that there was another gate inside the gate. All she could see in front of her was a vast sea. Hurak couldn't just fly over the water anymore. She made the decision that she needed to see if there was anything under the water. But no matter how many times she tried to submerge herself, some force kept her from penetrating. Meanwhile, the hunters had to fight a huge number of monsters. There were already a large number of wounded and killed. Sun shouted for no one to surrender because once they surrendered, all their comrades would die. Hunter June did not lose optimism, and shouted to Hunter Sun that they would never give up, for they were counting on a hefty bonus upon arrival. The monsters were attacking from all directions. They were of all kinds and builds, flying, underwater, and terrestrial. But the hunters fought bravely, for they had come there, not to die, but to save mankind. There's the man and the girl. They're watching. The man says he's bored. The man asked what was the name of the guy who killed Emugi and survived the battle with Haxan. The girl replied that it was Hansu. The man said that he didn't think Hansu would be able to defeat the Wizard King alone, because he picked him one of the strongest. Hansu had defeated the monster and it was time to meet the person he saved. The guild leader Aegis J introduced himself to the boy. J is the guy who was plotting to rip Hansu's head off. Hansu didn't like him anyway because he talked a lot. Even the Patriarch couldn't stand his chatter. He even asked his disciple to hit him once to shut him up. Jay said he admires Hansu and is a fan. He watched all the videos and live footage from the scene. However, Jay noticed that during the whole time they were talking to Hansu, he looked up at the sky several times. Jay remembered that Hansu's unique ability was listening to instructions. But he didn't realize what kind of instructions he was listening to. He then scrolled Hansu's fighting style in his head, and assumed that it felt like some sort of unrealistic martial art. The Patriarch at this time told Hansu that Jay continued to watch him, and advised his disciple to be careful because those eyes were showing him hostility. And Jay still couldn't calm down. He kept assuming that Hansu was listening to instructions about martial arts, most likely from someone like a ghost. Hansu asked Jay why he was looking at him like that. But they were interrupted when they reached another gate. At this time, an association ship approached the gate. Li Na informed her men that at this moment, Red Lion and Aegis Guild had entered the gate. She said that they would only join if the Red Lion and the Guild were defeated. Intelligence reported that Anderson's intensity was now 24. Li Na hoped that Hansu would be okay. Hansu and Jay stood in front of the gate inside the gate. Jay offered to go in, but Hansu said they didn't even know where they were and there was no point in going inside the gate. Jay replied that if he had any doubts about it, then he would go first, and began to cross the portal. Hansu wanted to stop him, but the Patriarch stopped him and told him to forget about that brat. Now you can explore the area better. But Hansu replied that he couldn't do that because they had come as a team. He started to cross the gate too. As soon as Hansu crossed the gate, he immediately started falling down. The portal ended up in the wall at the top of the castle. The guy managed to use the flight of the heavenly demon and climbed to the top of this castle. But Hansu couldn't understand where Jay had gone. And then he heard someone lurching and climbing up the wall. It was Jay. He told Hansu that he'd seen him fly and marveled at his speed. Suddenly they saw a whole city. Jay said that he had been to many places, but this was the first time he had seen civilization inside the gate. The guys decided to split up, but before they split up, Jay handed Hansu a red thingy and told him to use this if anything happened. The castle was quite old. Its appearance did not inspire confidence. It looked like it was about to collapse. Inside the castle, a skeleton of a man in a red cloak, with a crown and trident in his hands, sat on a throne. Meanwhile, the girl watcher informed the man that all the A-rangs of the Red Lion had been destroyed. The man kept saying he was bored and asked what about Hansu and Hurak. The girl replied that Hansu is approaching the ancient entropy castle, and Hurak is fighting the sea alone. Hurak meanwhile, as a brave and courageous girl on her own was destroying the monsters in the sea. She screamed that she would burn every monster alive, and then she would be able to find her people. But the monsters weren't getting smaller, they kept coming and coming. She could have left, but the exit was already gone. At this time, Jay was walking on the roof of the castle, but he had the complete feeling that he was just walking in circles. So he made the decision to go down the wall. The area impressed Jay, and the first thing he did was tell his installed program to find where there might be gems. Hansu looked around the area at this time, but there was no one. The Patriarch told him that he felt something foreign and huge. Suddenly, the same skeleton that was sitting on the throne appeared in front of Hansu. Only now he was 100 times bigger. The skeleton asked Hansu, "Are they trying to enter the Gate of Light?" Hansu made his way to the inside of the castle, and the skeleton thanked him for accepting his invitation. But the skeleton said he had to ask him something, and asked if they had arrived there through the Gate of Light. Hansu replied that if he meant a portal, that's exactly what it was. But the skeleton didn't understand what kind of portal. Suddenly, the Patriarch tells Hansu that he thinks he can see him. And the skeleton replies that of course he can see him. Skeleton clarified with the Patriarch if he was a sorcerer controlling souls. Hansu replied that he wasn't. Then the skeleton concluded that they were his guests and offered them some tea. The Patriarch asked him if he was the king. The skeleton replied that he did not know, and in general he remembered everything vaguely. He told his guests that he had been living for about 283 years, although he had taken 10 years in a year. Hansu was surprised that it was more than 2,000 years. The skeleton asked his guests why they didn't drink tea, for they say it can greatly increase mana reserves. He served it because he hadn't had guests for a long time. The Patriarch interjected, "Is mana, is it something edible?" He suggested that if the tea was poisoned, Hansu quickly spit out the tea. The Patriarch asked the king what happened to the castle because it was so dirty inside. Skeleton said he was glad he could finally talk to someone in this long time. He assumed he was probably the king of this place. At least he looked like one. The king told his guests that this country had been envied by everyone since the beginning. Happiness in this place was guaranteed to those who worked hard. People both worked and lived happily. But one day, suddenly a gate of light began to appear, and all kinds of monsters began to come out of it. It was chaos, and the skeleton doesn't remember if he was king at the time, but he was pretty sure he could use magic then. The king then used everything he had to destroy all the monsters. At this time the girl turned to the man, calling him knight. She said that the gulag had awakened and the fun had begun. And then he ordered to gather everyone in one place. Hurak meanwhile was still destroying the monsters in the sea, when suddenly she saw a gate within a gate, from which she saw the very same gulag. The skeleton continued his story. He said that he still couldn't destroy all the monsters and woke up already like this. The king doesn't remember what happened to his men. And he told his guests that if they came to kill him, to do it now. The Patriarch and Hansu didn't expect this, and asked how they could kill him if he was already dead. Meanwhile, a gulag came out of the gate, along with the slain men of the guild. As Hurak realized that one portal had blocked the other, she finally saw her squad. Hurak was very embittered. She was determined to destroy this monster for her squad no matter what it cost her. The girl told Knight that they had finally met, and asked him who he would bet on. Knight replied that he would bet on the gulag, of course. Hurak shouted to the gulag that after all he had done to her squad, she would destroy him. The girl went into Firebird mode, but the gulag was stronger than she would have thought. He used the strongest technique and there was an incredible explosion. Hurak decided that she needed to clear the area. She concentrated and destroyed all the small monsters that were around. Now it was the turn to deal with that huge monster that had come out of the gate along with Hurak's squad. The Patriarch at this time was telling the skeleton that it was ridiculous to ask him to kill him, couldn't he do it himself? Hansu asked the teacher to be more polite. Then the king asked Hansu if they were really teacher and student, and how could he even choose a soul as his teacher. And then the skeleton raised his trident, and used it to deliver an energy blast directly to his head. But the king was instantly resurrected. He revealed that he had tried killing himself many times before but was resurrected each time. The skeleton told his guests that he no longer remembered exactly what his curse was, he only asked to be deprived of the pain of existing alone. And then the Patriarch replied to the king that he would kill him, but only on one condition. Hansu tried to stop the teacher. At this time Jay went to the locked door. He was curious as to what was inside, but the door wouldn't open so easily, so he decided the easiest thing to do would be to break down the door and enter. Jay kicked the door with his magic hand. When he stepped inside, the whole place looked like an ancient structure. On both sides of the stairs were furnished with statues of monsters. But suddenly the statues were alive. Jay hadn't expected this. Looks like he'll have to fight. Meanwhile, the king asked the Patriarch if it would be his condition to find out how to get out of there. Hansu told the teacher that they just needed to go through the portal they had entered. The teacher slapped him on the back and called him a stupid jerk because the portal was gone. The Patriarch reminded him to always keep in mind where the exit from the place he is in is. The skeleton said he didn't know how to get out of there, and if he did, he would have gotten out himself long ago. But the king remembered that he seemed to know what he could do to help them, and asked to follow him. The Patriarch told Hansu that he might be up to something and to be on guard. The boy replied that he didn't think the king was going to do anything to them. The king went to the door and began to open it with the power of mana. He commanded the door to open, and it opened. Hansu asked what kind of energy it was. It wasn't like the energy the teacher uses. The Patriarch replied that he didn't know, he hadn't experienced something like that before. The king told them not to be afraid, because he could open this door at any time. He showed them an object and told them that the name of this marble was entropy. Nothing in the world can compare to it. The skeleton told Hansu to try putting his hand on it. But the king warned that he didn't know what the balloon would show him. Perhaps the orb will show him an ordinary day or the birthday of the entire universe, but whatever it is, it will be what Hansu truly desires. The Patriarch told the guy to give it a try because it was pointless to doubt anymore. They'd already gone too far. Hansu decided to give it a try, but as soon as he put his hands down, the balloon started to pull him in. Hansu started yelling to the teacher that the skeleton had tricked them. The guy tried his best to pull his hands away from the balloon, but it pulled him in even tighter. The skeleton began to laugh ironically. With hatred he said he apologized for that lie. The Patriarch asked the skeleton why he did it, and the skeleton told him that he just like them wanted to get out of there. He said that after years of searching, he had learned a way to manifest a gate of light, but he didn't have enough energy. When Hansu and the Patriarch arrived, the king felt with his intuition that the time had finally come. Hansu shouted that he was a real scumbag. How dare he deceive them when they sincerely trusted. The king explained to him that he had absorbed all the souls of his men and defeated the monsters, but in the end he was all alone and had no more energy left to gather. And now at last there were guests in his castle, and what guests, with the energy of thousands of people inside them. Skeleton said he wouldn't even ask where they got that energy from, because it would be his anyway. The Patriarch listened to all this, and told the king that he had learned enough of everything he needed to know. He told his disciple to calm down. The teacher told Hansu that did he really think that the martial arts he taught him wouldn't help him in this situation. The Patriarch told him to use the heavenly demon's dominant move. Hansu realized that he was too panicked because he couldn't remove his hands. Hansu began to shout that everything bows before the heavenly demon and applied the heavenly demon's dominant move. The skeleton couldn't believe his eyes. He didn't realize what had happened. Hansu freed himself and asked him, how dare he kneel on his knees? The Patriarch praised his disciple, and said that this was how every heavenly demon should behave. Hansu applied a force-destroying base and then a maiden strike. He was destroying the skeleton. Jay was fighting monsters in the meantime. But no matter how many of them he killed, the monsters kept appearing and appearing. He decided it was time to run away, but suddenly Jay fell into a hole with spears sticking out. He was lucky to get a foothold on the wall. Almost died, Jay thought, when he managed to get out of the trap. And then he saw a huge rock in front of him. Finally, this is it, shouted the guy, and gathering all the energy in his fist, sprinted to hit that rock. Meanwhile Hansu was fighting the skeleton. The guy already thought he had defeated the king, but the Patriarch said he was still alive. Even a direct hit from the tree didn't help. The skeleton came back to life again, and told the guy that it wasn't bad, like for a brat like him. But Hansu is just a speck of dust to the skeleton. The Patriarch told Hansu to watch his back carefully and not to panic, necessary to turn on the materialization of the heavenly demon. The king shouted at the guy that he was just a slimy slug. Hansu began to use the flight of the heavenly demon. The Patriarch told the skeleton that he was just an insect. How dare he even think that he could contend with a heavenly demon? The Patriarch told the insect not to try to reach heaven, for heaven is already in front of him. The skeleton replied that this was too arrogant, because he was just a skeleton soul. The king said he would wipe his student into powder and show him that there is always someone stronger in this world. The skeleton destroyed the entire floor of the castle, but Hansu wasn't confused. He realized that even though the king destroyed the entire floor, there were still pillars left. Hansu concentrated his energy and used his seed strike against the skeleton. The guy was already tired of messing around with those bones. At this time, Jay shattered the shell of the huge stone and reached the shining crystal inside. He was going to absorb it. This crystal turned out to be the king's life vessel. Jay realized that the power of this vessel was beyond A rank, it was definitely S rank. During the battle with Hansu, the skeleton felt that someone had touched his life vessel. Hansu used all the techniques of the heavenly demon and defeated the skeleton. But the king knew that if someone didn't take his life fragment, he would have won. And then suddenly Jay appeared. He was no longer like himself, incredible strength and power emanated from him. The renewed Jay headed back to the monsters. Now he said it would be different. That kind of power was driving him crazy. Jay couldn't get enough of himself, he admired every bit of his body. He could feel his power. Meanwhile, Hansu told the teacher that when he took hold of that balloon, he felt countless people's screams run through his body. Hansu made the decision to save all those people in the balloon, but the Patriarch couldn't leave him alone. So the teacher decided to go along with him, because if Hansu couldn't do it alone, the Patriarch wouldn't forgive himself. Hyosu, along with the Patriarch, traveled to that balloon. None of them had any idea what they would see there. And here it is, the city before the destruction. It was harmonious and idyllic. Everyone was minding their own business. But then the people noticed the gate of light. Everyone started running in panic and shouting to inform the king immediately. Monsters burst out of the gate, they began to kill civilians, the city was in chaos. The warriors of the kingdom shouted that no one should run away, they should fight honorably for their families and for the king. And then suddenly the king appeared and ordered everyone to retreat. Now he's taking matters into his own hands. The king with the honor of the Mori and the spirit of the Jabagaro that touched the heavens applied the blow from heaven. He succeeded in defeating the monsters and people admired and praised their king. The king returned to his chambers completely exhausted. He said that if this continues, at one point he will simply be destroyed. He no longer has the strength to fight. He knew that no one could stop the monsters from the gate of light but him. What good would this world be if he died? The king concluded that it only meant that he himself was the country. He realized that he had only one option left. The king began to think about necromancy, a sorcery that allows him to harvest the souls of people and absorb vast amounts of power. It was like he was darting from his bad side to his good side. In the moment he was already thinking how a country could even be called a country if there were no people in it. The bad side in him said he needed to use necromancy because people always regather around the one with power in his hands. The good side kept saying that this way he would only become a murderer, and that he was definitely crazy. What kind of king would go to the trouble of killing his own people? Just then, a man bursts into the room and tells the king that a gate of light has appeared near the eastern wall of the castle. Suddenly, the king couldn't stand it. He became furious at his subordinate and started yelling at him that the only thing they were doing was whining endlessly. The king asked the man how they were any different from the parasites clinging to him for the sake of prolonging their worthless lives. He promised to give their lives some value, and killed a subordinate, saying that their blood would not be spilled in vain. The king wanted to gather all the souls of these people during eternity and gain unprecedented power. In the name of the forbidden god Gamara, he ordered all the souls in the city to come to him. And suddenly the souls of all the people in the city began to leave their bodies. The souls of children, women, old people, every single one of them. They flew to the king, and the king began to devour them. He enjoyed what he felt as he grew stronger with each soul. Infused with the souls of his citizens, the king went out to fight the monster from the gate. He knew he would not lose to any more monsters. Meanwhile, Hansu, immersed in that ball, heard the scream of every soul present there. It was impossible to bear it. The Patriarch shouted at him that he had to endure it. Hansu had to handle it, especially since he wanted to help those souls himself. The souls lured Hansu, they screamed that he alone had a body there, that he needed to get rid of it and become one of them. Then suddenly a white light appeared in front of the guy. The light told him that he had done a great job. The boy tried to shout to the teacher, but he was nowhere to be found. The white light welcomed the guy to the glowing man. Hansu didn't know who it was and asked the man where he came from. The man stroked Hansu's head and said that he poor man had suffered so much because of those souls. With his touch, the old man brought Hansu out of the darkness, and finally the boy saw the busy city again. And then, looking closely at the man, Hansu recognized the king. The guy started yelling that he was a scumbag and was trying to cheat again. The king replied to the guy that how could he even say that, since the king had waited 3024 days for this moment. The king explained that the skeleton wasn't the only one waiting for a strong man to come from the outside world. Hansu replied that the skeleton said he had been waiting for 2000 years. The king replied that what kind of fool would even believe him. Then the lad asked him if he and the skeleton together were the same person. The king replied that they were both. The king explained that when he used necromancy, he abandoned his evil self and immersed himself in entropy. Simply put, he was thrown out of his own body. That's how he and the skeleton came to be. At this point, the king took control of himself and created a world in another dimension. He was also able to save a few souls that entropy had absorbed and help them settle here and move on with their lives. Though every day is the same for people here, but at least they don't suffer from pain, the king explained. The king marveled at Hansu's ability to listen to instructions. He said that in his 3000 years, he had never seen anything like it. The boy asked how he knew that. Hansu began to ask his teacher what he should do to the king, if he should hit him. But the king replied that he was the one who had called his teacher here. The king told Hansu that his evil side kept the life source separate from their joint body in order to live eternal life. But Hansu entered the gate with another person from the outside world, and that person took the vessel of life. Hansu realized it was Jay. The king says that Jay is now looking for Hansu. He has become another reintegration of evil. Jay is no longer the man he was known to be. The king warns that he will try to kill the guy. Hansu agreed to cooperate, and is willing to listen to instructions from the king. Meanwhile, at the entrance of the portal, Lee Mi-na and the people from the association were controlling the situation. The reading said that Anderson's intensity had risen to 63. Lee Mi-na realized that all she could do was just wait there and hope that Hansu was okay. Hurak continued to fight the monster at this time. She wanted to get it over with as soon as possible. The girl tried her best. She used an attack in which she put all her power. But the monster didn't die. She didn't understand what kind of degenerate he was. The king at this time told Hansu that he had spent all his strength to create this world. And he would need to learn mana control to free the people. Hansu asked what is mana. The king explained that Hansu uses ki energy, which is the purified energy of nature. And mana is the raw energy of nature. The king told Hansu to absorb the mana energy in its pristine form. The guy activated the listening instructions. Hansu instantly absorbed and studied the mana. The king was surprised by this ability. He didn't understand how it was possible. The king admired the guy. Hansu had a mana breath after only 3 hours. The king thought he was a genius. Hansu said he could feel the mana and asked what he should do next now. The king said that now you have to take control of all the souls inside this body. The king warned the guy that he would most likely feel the pain of every soul. Hansu just needs to take back all their pain. The boy listened to all the instructions and got down to business. And that's when Jay came up to him. Jay started calling out to Hansu, but the guy didn't answer. Jay said he was sorry because he wanted to see what he could do. Hansu began to feel as if his heart was about to burst. He had to be careful because there would be no second chance. The king told Hansu to put mana into every word he uttered, and said the word disappear. Hansu uttered a word, and the ball shattered into small shards. The souls were finally released. The Patriarch saw the vengeful spirits disappear. He was proud that his disciple had done it. Suddenly the king appeared behind the Patriarch's back. He told the Patriarch that his disciple had accomplished a great feat. Now he and his men were finally free. The king said he would be grateful to the Patriarch if he would tell Hansu that they gained their freedom because of him. Hansu woke up and saw Jay in front of him. Jay told him it was great that he was awake, because it was boring to kill him like that. Jay aimed a strong energy ball directly at Hansu. He wished with all his heart to destroy him. However, Hansu's response didn't last long. Jay missed the punch and realized that he couldn't keep up with it with that kind of power. Jay got angry and started shouting that he was the strongest since he had gained S rank. He wanted to show Hansu his power. Hansu felt the skeleton's strength in Jay. He realized that Jay had actually absorbed his energy. In that case, Hansu just couldn't let him go. Now all he had to do was fight and win. Although Jay was a strong opponent, Hansu was able to overpower his opponent with incredible strength and speed. Hansu told the teacher that he was overflowing with energy. The mana power that the king had taught him was synergizing with his internal energy. Hansu realized that in this state, he would be able to defeat even Haxan if he came to his soul again. The Patriarch recognized it too. He told the guy that the power he felt in him was comparable to the highest peak level from the world where the Patriarch lived before. But this all has one downside: mana can't be used and stored as long as ki energy. Suddenly, a gate appeared in the sky above Hansu. He saw Hurak fighting a huge monster inside the gate. Meanwhile, Knight checked with the girl if the skeleton lost the battle with Hansu. The girl confirmed the information. Then Knight said that if the Gulag lost Hurak, the place would be destroyed, though they tried to avoid that outcome with all their might. Knight became furious and said, Gulag would never lose, even if the two sides of the king reunited, there was no way they could defeat him. He informed the girl that while the main battle was going on, he would take care of the rest of the bugs that weren't as important. At this time Hansu didn't understand what was going on, how a bunch of portals were trying to come together in one place. The Patriarch said that they seemed to have started from inside that portal. The teacher explained to Hansu that the phenomenon of portals in other portals is called overlapping. Suddenly, a girl allied with Knight appeared behind Hansu's back. She told Hansu that he was upsetting Knight by his existence. The Patriarch told the guy that this girl makes him feel bloodlust. She decided to send Hansu a heartfelt message, but before she could move, Hansu had already flown back. The girl noticed that he was so fast that there was even a residual image of him. The Patriarch became proud of his disciple. He asked Hansu if he used mana to instantly increase his strength. The fight started. Hansu used a seed punch, but the girl blocked the punch with a regular umbrella. Hansu thought she was just mocking him. The girl told him that he was such a horrible person, and how could he ever do that to a weak girl like her. Hansu applied the heavenly demon's flying technique. The girl was surprised by such a unique movement technique. Hansu yelled at her to answer why she attacked him. The girl said she didn't have to explain anything to him. Hansu started to apply the tree kick, but the girl only taunted him and yelled that he couldn't get her. The girl lured Hansu over to Knight's place. She apologized to Knight and said that she underestimated the guy. Knight turned to Hansu and said that all he had to do was exhaust the skeleton. Hansu asked who he even was. Knight continued that at least he had such plans for Hansu. The guy asked again who the man was. Knight replied that he didn't have to worry about it, since he was going to die soon anyway. And then he attacked Hansu. However, after fighting Hansu for only a couple of minutes, Knight realized that he was indeed very strong and fast. But Knight managed to throw Hansu off the cliff, and the guy started flying down the cliff. There were peaks at the bottom, and Hansu fell on them. At this time, Hurak was still fighting with the monster. He suddenly shouted out, "Gulag." Hurak realized that it was most likely his name and he was quite serious about the battle. Hurak applied the fire bird mode and said that it didn't matter which one of them died, but they should know the name of the one by whose hand they fell. Hurak gave her name to the Gulag, and said that she swore on the name of her fallen comrades that she would destroy it. Hurak shouted that most S-ranks had techniques that would take their life in exchange for incredible strength. Techniques that use life force as fuel. The girl dared to use such a technique. Hurak assembled a real atomic bomb in her body, and said that now the plasma would burn everything. At this time, the association ship was told that the Anderson density was already 85, and it was only going up. Limina felt as if the portal was about to explode. She thought that if even the S-ranks couldn't stop it, then they didn't stand a chance. At this time, the girl received a call from the head of the department. Limina told him that she didn't think they could make it through. Limina reported that there had been no word from the portal yet. She asked what they should do next if there were no reinforcements. However, the department head told the girl not to worry because someone was already rushing to help. Suddenly, the girl noticed someone flying towards their ship at an incredible speed. When he landed, Limina recognized him. It was Huxon. The request from Korea came to the guild ES. When it did, Jill asked Huxon if he was going to accept the request. Takashi reminded Huxon that he would then have to help Hurak, whom he hates so much. Huxon said he would only help if there was no way they could do without him. If they find someone else, he'll stay home. Jill and Takashi reminded him that hunters are needed to save people, it's their calling in life. Huxon went to help. Jill and Takashi also made the decision that they couldn't fall behind. Limina told Huxon that the Anderson density in the portal is very high right now and it is possible the portal will explode in 30 minutes. She also informed him that there were now 30 A-ranked hunters and the head of the Red Lion Guild, Hurak, in the portal. Then Jill and Takashi arrived on the ship. Limina realized that there was still hope for them to be rescued. Huxon asked if Hansu was inside the portal. The girl said he was there too. Huxon thanked her for the information. Huxon thought that if that kid is inside, it should be fine. He knew Hyun had more than just ability. Meanwhile, Hurak had finished creating the plasma sword she was going to use to blast everything around her. The Patriarch watched from the side, and realized that Hurak was using his crown technique. He couldn't believe that she could control such a powerful energy. Hansu came to his senses. He thought that if he hadn't managed to gather mana and ki together in time, and didn't strengthen with this defense, he would be dead by now. But even with that kind of preparation, Hansu took a lot of damage. Seeing the guy, the Patriarch asked why he was covered in blood. Hansu asked not to ask any questions yet and asked what was inside the portal. The Patriarch told him that Hurak was trying to finish the battle. At this time, Knight flew up and told Hansu how dare he get distracted during the battle. The Patriarch told the guy to use the yin-yang demon. However, Knight's attacks could not be predicted. The Patriarch told the student to use the leaf strike to block. Hansu began to gain the upper hand. Knight sensed the danger. He knew he had to dodge the technique somehow. Hurak had almost reached her limit, just a little more and she would be ready to release her energy. Hurak made a kick, and completely exhausted fell down into the abyss. She had no strength left at all. During her fall, she remembered one of her battles and her captain. The captain told her that she was a great girl and had done well. The captain reminded the girl that she would soon be in S rank, but for now she needed to watch his back. He asked Hurak that if anything happened to him, that she should take care of his son Jay, even though he's still an underdog. Hurak asked the captain not to bullshit. After all, nothing could happen to him, but still made a promise. And so in the moment of her fall, Hurak apologized to her captain for her failure to keep her promise. At this time, the girl yelled to Knight that the Gulag portal was closing off. Knight replied that he knew and asked her not to make any noise. And then Knight cut the portal with his sword. It was the first time Hansu had ever seen that. Knight said he wondered how Hansu had managed to hold on so long. Knight tells Hansu that he doesn't know if Hansu can survive today. But he promises that if the guy survives and they'll meet again, then Knight will appear before him in his true form, and then Hansu won't survive for sure. Knight disappeared, and Hansu yelled at him for being a coward. The Patriarch told him not to work so hard because Knight had left. Hansu asked his teacher what he should do next, since he couldn't be stuck here. The Patriarch told him to turn around and look at the sword that Knight had left behind. The teacher told Hansu that this place would close soon, and one should swing the sword just like Knight did. Hansu didn't know what to do. The Patriarch said he needed to infuse the sword with internal energy right now. Hansu poured his inner energy, but nothing came out of it. He needed to make a decision urgently. Then the guy tried to infuse it with mana. But as soon as he tried to swing his sword, he was knocked down by the water. The Patriarch saw that his disciple was so weakened that even water was able to cripple him. However, Hansu managed to get a hold and swung his sword once more. Finally the portal opened and Hansu jumped into it. The boy found himself in the same desert they had originally entered. Now it remained to figure out how to proceed. In the portal above him, Hansu saw that place flooded with water. The Patriarch explained that it had now merged with the place where Hurak had fought. But as soon as Hansu heard that the guild leader was still there, he made the decision to return there immediately. Guy swung his sword to cut the portal and go to Hurak's aid. He couldn't do otherwise. Meanwhile Knight had returned to his kingdom. He was badly wounded and the girl offered to change his uniform, but he refused. Then she thought that Knight hadn't changed his clothes even though he had been injured so much. Was his promise to the king really that important? Knight read her thoughts, freaked out, and started yelling that the king was a being beyond awe and fear. Knight didn't even notice he'd changed his appearance. He said that no one would ever dare to disobey the king's orders. The healers came and said they would start treatment and by tomorrow everything would be fine. Knight thought it was a shame that the skeleton king was dead, but if the overlapping portal collapsed, it would be quite a sight. Knight hoped that they would meet Hansu again, but he didn't understand why the information about Hansu's abilities and his actual strength were so different. Just then, a potion of restoration was brought to him. Knight asked if the king was interested in it. He was told he hadn't, but the rook was with him now. Knight didn't understand why the rook was there. Then it was explained to him that if the plan went wrong, Knight's punishment would be death. Knight beckoned the girl over to him, and said it was a good time and he was sure everyone was only chafing at the fragments. The girl asked if he wanted to start the search. He replied that the portal explosion didn't matter now. He would be the first to find the fragments, and make the rook bow to him. Knight ordered an urgent order to tell the pawn to start searching and they would find the singularity. A girl named Nim watched the battle and said that there was nothing funnier than this. She recognized that Hansu was strong too, but she couldn't believe the stupid Nate didn't notice the singularity right under her nose. Nim knew that Knight thought his plan had worked, but he had no idea about anything and was going crazy trying to find the singularity. She couldn't wait to see the attack. It was even more fun for her than watching the battle. Then an unknown man came to her and said that they had found him. Nim told him to show him quickly. The girl was so excited to see him. But the man reminded her that he was already dead. She sighed and said that she even gave Jay a bracelet, but nevertheless he still lost to Hansu. The man asked what he should do next. Nim said that since he had absorbed the vessel, it could still be useful, so she ordered him to take it with him. They took Jay's body and headed into the portal. Nim said that she had faith in Hansu and that he would be able to find the oasis. At this time, Hansu was trying to get to the dimension where Hurak stayed. He swung his sword, went through the portal, but still ended up in the same desert. The Patriarch told him not to despair and try a few more times, but there wasn't much time left. Meanwhile, the city was showing breaking news, saying that right now the gate that appeared in the Western Sea was close to exploding. Panic gripped the people. They didn't know what to expect if the gate exploded again. But they knew the Red Lion was already there, so all they had to do was wait. Yoon decided to visit Hyunsu's brother. She started to tell him that his brother has become one of those who enter the gate to save others. The girl asks Hyuntae to wake up because Hyunsu is really upset about his brother being bedridden. Suddenly, Yoon's brother and sister started making noise, and she had to take the babies and leave the room. But Yoon promised that she would come back soon. At this time, Hyunsu was once again through the portal into the desert. The Patriarch couldn't understand what was going on either. They were just winding around the desert. Suddenly Hyunsu saw an oasis in front of him. He thought it was very strange. The Patriarch was also surprised. Hyunsu approached the water, but there was no reflection at all. Then he decided to touch the water, but it wasn't water at all. Hyunsu assumed it was a disguised portal. The Patriarch also allowed for that possibility. And then Hyunsu, along with his teacher, decided to cross the portal, and began to dive into the water. Hyunsu wakes up in his bed and thinks what a wonderful dream he had. The boy goes into the kitchen and sees his father there. The father says something funny, but Hyunsu doesn't hear it. Hyunsu's mother asked her husband not to be too rude. His father replied that he was just kidding. Hyuntae was eating a burger, and said that if Hyunsu slept for 24 hours, it was more like hibernation. Hyunsu told his brother not to be cocky and took away his favorite burger. Hyuntae got angry and started yelling at him to return his burger immediately. Then Hyunsu gave him a bill and told him that he had been paid yesterday. Hyunsu then went into his parents' room and asked them what they would like to eat today. His parents said they were pleased and would decide together in the evening. The whole family got into the car and went about their business. The traffic jams on the roads that day were particularly heavy. Then my father thought he could make a slight detour and take a country road. They got to a country road, and Hyunsu said it was really better. His father told him that no navigator could compare to a road veteran. And then Hyuntae notices some bright glow in the sky. He asked Hyunsu what it was. They assumed it was probably lightning. It was a portal and a huge monster appeared from it and attacked the car Hyunsu's family was riding in. After all this horror, Hyunsu woke up in the hospital. He didn't understand what was happening and tried to remember all the details. He started screaming where his family was. Doctors ran up and told the guy that his parents were dead and his brother was in a coma. Then the day of the funeral came, and Hyunsu was having a hard time with it. His heart felt like it was being torn apart. The boy collapsed near his parents' ashes and began to sob loudly, but then he heard someone start shouting his name, telling him to come to his senses. Hyunsu woke up and noticed his teacher beside him. The Patriarch told him that he didn't wake up and he had to go to extreme measures. Suddenly Hyunsu saw a stranger in front of him. He said it was some kind of amazing variable. It was strange that it was an otherworldly being. The unidentified man said he only drafted one person and doesn't understand why it came out that way. The Patriarch called Hyunsu a jerk and asked him what kind of dream he had that made him cry so hard. Hyunsu remembered that it was just a dream and exhaled. Then the Patriarch told the lad to never dare to cry in his dreams, because it was impermissible for a heavenly demon. Then the unknown man turned to them, and said that if they were going to deliberately ignore him. And no sooner had he finished speaking than the Patriarch swung his hand and shut him up. The Patriarch told the stranger not to dare lift a finger until he authorized it. Then Hyunsu asked the teacher if he could really attack this man. And the Patriarch explained that as soon as he saw him, he immediately realized that his attack would reach him. The teacher said it didn't work with the skeleton because it had belonged to the physical world for quite some time. But the good side of the king was pure spirit, like the Patriarch himself. And the Patriarch didn't attack him because there was no reason to. The stranger said that if the Patriarch succeeded in destroying him, he would recognize that he had great power. The man didn't think he would ever meet anyone so outstanding. The man recognized the Patriarch's power and asked for his forgiveness for this ridiculous situation. He said that a year ago people almost managed to kill him, and now he can't use his power like before. Besides, now he needs to maintain this world. Hansu started screaming that he meant he was the reason he had this horrible dream about his past. The man said he seemed to be pushing a sore spot and called the guy by name. Then Hansu wondered how he knew him, or if he could read other people's minds too. The man replied that of course he could, and that the place had been designed so that everyone had similar dreams when they entered it. The man explained that these are the sweetest and most horrible dreams that people can never wake up from. In this way the man receives the vessel, that is, the body of his victim. But he confessed that he had originally wanted to summon Hurak, but it was he who reached the desert first. Hansu was really pissed off by this. The guy started yelling that who was he to steal people's bodies in the first place and took a swing at the man. Hansu gathered his energy into a fist and threw a punch. But his hand went through the man's body. The Patriarch started yelling that his attack wouldn't work and to get out of there immediately. But Hansu didn't make it in time. The guy realized that the bastard had now moved into his body. The man inside the guy was saying that for such a weak soul, his strong body was useless. The man had squeezed Hansu's soul out of his body. Now the boy could only watch him being used. The man said it was worth the wait of a year. He really liked his new body. He began to feel the remnants of mana. And the energy of this body gave him incredible pleasure. The Patriarch realized that this man was a spellcaster who stole other people's bodies. And he told him that when he was in Murima, such spellcasters were burned at the stake. Then the Patriarch used one of his techniques. The Patriarch banished the caster from the boy's body. The boy could not believe his eyes that the Patriarch could interfere with other people's bodies. The Patriarch said it was a mystery to him too, perhaps that's what he was there to find out. He told the caster to be prepared to die since he dared to defy him. But Hansu stopped the teacher, and said that if he killed the caster, they could be stuck there forever. The Patriarch replied that after the creator dies, this place should also collapse. And if it doesn't, Hansu can die. Hansu said the sword doesn't obey him anymore. And killing the caster doesn't guarantee that they'll be able to create a portal. The caster began to laugh loudly. The Patriarch was annoyed by this and asked him what was making him laugh so hard. Then the caster said that by making many calculations, he had managed to figure out that today at last he would be able to leave this place. But he couldn't believe what was happening. The caster decided to introduce himself properly. He said his name was Pavlician. He also said that they might know him as the ancestral dragon. Hansu was surprised because Hurak said that the ancestral dragon was sealed a year ago. Pavlician explained that it was because he made them believe it. He even used soul language on them. Being on the verge of death, he was infirm, but he once again contemplated his ingenious plan. Pavlician said he was the one who spread the fragments, and he himself hid there, waiting for the day when someone would find the place. He also said that his time is coming to an end and he will be gone by tomorrow. He had the perfect plan in which Hurak would come to this place, he would take her body and finally turn the entire outside world into chaos. But now an incredible being had gotten involved in all of this, something that was beyond his calculations. The Patriarch asked the caster why he was so eager to get his hands on other people's worlds. The spellcaster said that the world he lived in was absolutely devastated. It was difficult for mana to exist in it. The spellcaster continued that when he was ready to accept his fate a certain someone offered him a deal. Hansu asked who exactly offered the deal. The spellcaster replied that they called themselves kings. The caster then asked if Hansu, even after fighting Night, still didn't realize what was going on. He explained that if Night turned to his true form, he would become stronger than King before he split into a good side and a bad side. The caster continued that the skeleton and Knight only fought him half-heartedly. And Hansu should think twice, that if he had so much trouble with Knight, meeting the king would kill him in a second. The spellcaster went on to say that the kings had taught him how to create portals, and he could connect parts of his world to the earth. But it wasn't easy because of humans. He felt that as long as humans existed, it would be difficult for him to connect their worlds. So the caster created this plan. When people thought they had killed him, he split the portal into fragments. He said that everything that happened next they already knew, now it was his time. The spellcaster acknowledged that it was an honor to meet such an outstanding master as the Patriarch. He turned to the Patriarch and said that although he had not succeeded with his plan, he was sure there was a special reason for it. The caster said it was time for him to go to the other world, but he hadn't closed the passage, so they needed to get out of there soon. In parting, he gave Hansu's advice for the guy to take a deeper mana breath on his way out. As soon as Hansu plunged into the portal, his mana amount increased exponentially. The guy couldn't even unclench his eyes from the pressure, he needed to recycle his mana. Hansu was now able to create internal mana energy. His body began to transform to endure the immense power. It reminded Hansu of when the Time Master had cleared his meridians. However, the guy jumped to conclusions. After just a second, he was already reminded of receiving the body of a heavenly demon. But Hansu wouldn't be the first time, he would be able to bear it. After going through all the stages of transformation, experiencing incredible pain, and enduring it all, Hansu reached the peak of blooming 3 flowers. Meanwhile, the Patriarch, passing through the portal, found himself in a place he didn't understand. He didn't understand what the tricks were. The Patriarch said that the ancestral dragon was definitely gone, so who summoned it here? He said there was no point in hiding anymore. But no one answered the Patriarch's questions to him. Then the Patriarch thought that as long as his disciple wasn't there, he could go wild, so he began to break the energy wall. After a few blows, someone started yelling for the Patriarch to stop and offer to talk. The Patriarch asked who was there. But the unknown man replied that he would not recognize him even if he told him. Then the Patriarch decided if that was the case, he should throw a couple more punches. But he was again asked to stop. The Patriarch told him to introduce himself, but the stranger replied that he could not. The Patriarch then asked if he couldn't or just didn't want to. The stranger said the second. The Patriarch asked who he was and why he had called him there. The stranger again replied that he could not tell him. But the only thing the stranger said was that the Patriarch was just curious about him and he wanted to meet him once. That just brought the Patriarch out. At that time, the Patriarch applied the dominant move of the heavenly demon. The stranger couldn't get enough of it, saying that it was unbelievable for an old man. The Patriarch wondered why such similar scum thought they could approach him without revealing themselves. Meanwhile, Hansu had completed a complete transformation of his body, he was now hundreds of times stronger, faster and more powerful. Hansu landed at the very spot where Hurak was fighting. But suddenly, the Patriarch flew up to him. The Patriarch was surprised that he was able to become more powerful again in such a short period of time. Hansu said that they need to find Hurak. The Patriarch said he didn't feel her presence there and suggested they fly around and find her. Hansu himself didn't expect that he could fly now. The Patriarch explained that he needed to release a huge amount of energy and everything would work out. Hansu gathered all the energy in his acupuncture points, released the right amount of energy, and finally flew. At this time, the city was talking in the news that the Anderson density at the gate over the Western Sea, called the Fragment of Paradise, had exceeded 90 points. Also, kilometer-long traffic jams have formed on the way out of the city from those trying to leave the epicenter of a possible gate explosion. The presenters stated that normally if the gate density exceeds 90, the explosion occurs immediately, and at this point the gate condition is rated as critical. Meanwhile, Hansu and his teacher were flying around looking for Hurak. Hansu told the Patriarch that he should have told him earlier that he could fly. However, the Patriarch replied that if he had said it, Hansu would have been unable to do so anyway. Suddenly, Hansu spots the head of the guild on one of the rocks. She was lying very still. Hansu asked the teacher how he should land. The Patriarch replied that it was simply necessary to reduce the amount of energy released. But Hansu didn't calculate the amount and started slamming into the water. He ended up crashing into a rock. The Patriarch said he just turned into a pancake because he just couldn't control the force. But Hansu's attention was only on the guild leader. Hansu didn't understand what had happened to Hurak and why her hair color had changed. The Patriarch said that she seemed to have had quite a battle. He suggested that her opponent was very strong. Meanwhile, on the association ship, the Anderson density was estimated at 95 points. No one understood why it hadn't exploded yet. Suddenly, everyone on the ship noticed something coming out of the portal. The order was given for everyone to prepare for battle. Suddenly, everyone saw Hansu coming out of the portal with Hurak in his arms. The gate began to disappear and Hansu completed the raid. Lee Mina saw Hansu and rushed over to meet him. The girl was very happy that he had survived. Lee Mina told Hansu that this is a real relief for her and that she was really worried that something would happen to him. But Hansu replied that the guild leader should be taken care of first. Lee Mina was shocked. She didn't even immediately recognize Hurak. Lee Mina said that she hardly recognized the guild head, her hair color had changed. But the girl also noticed that Hansu had changed physically too. Hansu felt like he had gotten something great. Now he knew he was a different person and would never be the same. Suddenly, Haksen came up to Hansu and said that he had become noticeably stronger. Hansu didn't expect to see him there. Hansu reminded Haksen that he still had a restraining order against approaching him. Haksen asked Hansu what happened inside the portal. Hansu replied that he was a normal guild member, so he couldn't divulge details. Haksen told him that he might be a regular guild member, but he wasn't a regular hunter, that was a fact. Hansu replied that it was different. Haksen was surprised that he didn't deny it. The guy said that he's learned a lot about himself, and now he's changed. Haksen said he'd like to try it out, if only there was an opportunity, of course. Hansu might have said yes, but he was stopped by Lee Mina. So Hyun replied to Haksen that it wasn't today. And Haksen said goodbye until next time. Hansu advised him to prepare for that day. Haksen flies off, and Takashi tells Hansu that even though he acts like it, he's pretty reliable. Takashi explained to Hansu that Haksen had put all his business aside and rushed there only because hunters exist to protect humanity. Takashi also said that he personally arrived to keep his promise, but didn't help much. Hansu said that in that case, he would keep his promise until it was really needed. Jill shouted to Hansu that he could call them at any time, and they would drop everything they were doing and rush over at the same moment. When Jill and Takashi left too, Lee Mina thought that they must be very good people. At this time, the S-ranked hunter Raven, who was ranked first in the hunter rankings. Raven, who is also the chairman of the gate committee, heard the news about Hansu again. A girl named Sherry entered Raven's room and reported that the hunters had handled the raid. Raven said he had already been informed. He immediately apologized to the girl for his appearance. He didn't want her to see his horrible scar. The girl wasn't the least bit embarrassed by this, she even said she was sure he was the Singularity Network. Raven said he thought so, too. Sherry then helped him pick out a tie and suggested a red one. Raven said that the second Singularity would be joining them soon. The girl replied that she really hoped so. Raven remembered that 2 years ago on the day of the fall their capture squad had seen an image. An image of hope and the great evil that would appear in the future. Also in that image before them were the 3 singularities that would fight against him. Raven informed Sherry that he urgently needed to go to Korea. The girl asked if he would personally go there. Raven replied that it was better that way, because if they made a move first, it would be a headache. The girl replied that she would definitely contact Anderson. Suddenly Isaac, who is the first singularity, appeared. He said he was going too, and how could Teacher Raven forget about him? At this time, rallies against the government were taking place in the city. People shouted slogans that they had the right to know the truth. One leader cried out that their government was blindly relying on the awakened and doing nothing. The Patriarch was watching the news and it said that this time it was the same again, and if the Red Lions weren't there, Korea would have ceased to exist long ago. The Patriarch did not understand why people were doing this and what they were dissatisfied with, because they had already saved them. Hansu explained that it was all because everyone has the right to know. The Patriarch then asked what would it change. Hansu replied that they still want to know. And then Hansu catches sight of the portal from which the Patriarch appeared. And the guy said that he had seen many portals, but never one so black. Hansu realized that it might be an open field of monsters, and wondered if he could report the association. But the Patriarch said they might still need him. The Patriarch informed the kid that he was now ready, and could finally learn the remaining 6 techniques. Hansu was surprised, as his teacher had flatly refused to show him these techniques before. The Patriarch explained that it was because they were different from the first 6 techniques, it was simply useless to show them. While the first 6 techniques are based on Earth, the other 6 are martial arts that use earth as a base, the Patriarch continued. The Patriarch told Hansu that he was able to somehow utilize the heavenly spirit body with the skill he has. But will Hansu be able to explain what the technique is? The Patriarch asked him. Hansu realized that he really had never given it a second thought, so he was gratefully willing to listen to his teacher's instruction. But the Patriarch stopped him and said they should eat fried rice with marinated pork first. At this time, Raven checked with Anderson, the head of scientific affairs of the gate, to see if everything would be all right. Raven told Anderson that while he didn't doubt him, after all, who should they trust with the brains of the awakened if not him? Anderson said it's still a test product and it might be worth asking Lord Demon. Raven replied that he didn't really want to meet him, especially if he found out that he was trying to copy his technology. He would be very angry. Anderson laughed and said he'd rather sue him and asked him to bring back some fried chicken from Korea. In parting, Raven asked him to look after Isaac. Anderson was surprised, because that's what Sherry was for. But Raven said he didn't listen to anyone except those who were stronger than he was. A troubled enough brat, Anderson replied. But he promised to keep a close eye on him. But then Isaac suddenly walked in and started asking who the troublemaker was. He reminded me that he had said he would go too. Raven started yelling that it was too early for him. Isaac was infuriated by this. He didn't realize how early it was if the only one stronger than him was a high-ranked S-ranked hunter. Raven said he didn't mean his power. Isaac asked, "Is this all about bloody etiquette again?" Anderson intervened and said he might actually take him along, maybe he could learn some sort of etiquette through practice. Isaac asked his teacher to believe in him at least a little. Besides, Korea is famous for his upbringing. Isaac finally managed to break Raven, and he agreed to take him with him, but on the condition that the boy stay with him. Meanwhile, Hansu was preparing to practice the other 6 techniques with the Patriarch. The Patriarch noticed that Hansu had changed a lot and had become very different. The Patriarch asked his disciple who he thought the heavenly demons were. The question put Hansu in a stupor. Hansu replied that he couldn't say for sure, but based on the name, they were demons that came down from heaven. The Patriarch said that he was partly right. Suddenly, they were interrupted by the energy outside the portal. Hansu immediately needed to get out of the portal. Raven was standing at his door.